Welcome, everybody, to the Jim Masters Show Live. How are all of you? We welcome you from all around the world. This is our entertainment lifestyle talk show series that we started over 235 episodes ago. Hard to believe we've done all of that since late April, early May of last year, with show after show after show, extraordinary guests, literally from all walks of life, fields of endeavor, wealths of success. And of course, we do host chat shows, and we've done shows on food. We've gone on location. We've done entertainment and music. Guests that we have come from all backgrounds: television, music, film, Broadway, Hollywood, science, health and wellness, culinary arts, sports, comedy, inspiration, authors. This is designed for those of you joining us for the very first time as a traditional, sort of old school entertainment lifestyle talk show series. If you think of like the Dick Cavett's, David Susskind's, Carson, Steve Allen, Mark Griffin, Mike Douglas, but blended in with the modern sensibilities and cool vibes of today. So you're taking the sensibilities of the old school way of doing talk shows and variety and really good conversations that sometimes go deep and very informative and entertaining, blending it with some of those modern vibes of today and having all of you around the world. We toast all of you. We welcome all of you. Sometimes I feel when I do this and I go you, and you, that I'm supposed to be doing this and then this. I'm supposed to be doing some sort of a blessing. So this is our crisscross blessing, the Jim Masters crisscross blessing to all of our viewers all around the world. And we welcome you to the show. Yes, our friend George Burns is right there. You see him there. He's in place. He's one of our cast of characters. Gilligan from Gilligan's Island is here as well, and all the rest are here. We welcome you. I hope you're having a good day today. Let's check in with some of our viewers. I want to let you know we have an extraordinary guest, somebody who is... he's been doing what he's been doing for a long time, and that is inspiring and entertaining and lifting people up through his extraordinary work. Brilliant and legendary playwright, songwriter, journalist, writer, you name it. Jeffrey Sweet is with us, and it's very sweet to have him here because we are excited to chat with him, learn about his incredible life, projects that he's still working on, things that you may remember that he is notable for, and so much more. Let's welcome our lovely viewers around the world. We'll scan through a few of them here, and then we'll welcome our very special guest to the Jim Masters Show Live. Dear Jim and Lovedies, I wish you a beautiful evening. See you soon. Thank you, Willie, watching in Holland, in Pine Islands, Florida. Mary Bishop is here. Hello, Jim and Lovedies. Good to see you, Mary, and welcome to the show. Allentown, Pennsylvania, USA is in the house. Happy new moon blessings, Jim, guest and Lovedies. Good magic is in the air. Absolutely. You got it. Jennifer Barry is here. Jen is Zen. Sherry is here. Hello, Jim and Lovedies. Good to see you, Sherry. Welcome. Nice to see you tuning in. We love having you here. Kathy Short from Cleveland, Ohio, USA. Happy Wednesday, Jim and Lovedies. So nice to be here. So nice to have you here as well. We love when you're here, Kathy. Bernadette is here as well. Hello, Jim and fellow Lovedies. Nice to see you, Bernadette. Welcome. And everybody says hello to everybody else, too, which I think is really, really nice. And Wozniak is checking in. Hi, Jim and all Lovedies. Happy Wednesday evening. Good to see you as well. And nice to see you're doing well. Anne, looking good. Our wonderful friend June Rachelson Aspa is here. Happy Wednesday, all. Good to see you, June, in New York City. Longtime dear friend of mine, friend of our family as well. Merlin is here as well from Ontario, Canada. Hi, Jim and all Lovedies. Good to see you as well from South Africa. Juanita is here once again. Juanita Kuzer, which we learned last night with our comedian guest, Josh, who was with us. Hello, Jim and all the lovely Lovedies. Good to see you in South Africa. From Nova Scotia, the other side of the Atlantic. Good evening, everybody, from Karen Campbell Green. Good to see you as well. Now we take you down to St. Augustine, Florida. Linda Odell is here. Good evening, Mr. Lovedy. Good evening, Lovedy. It's good to see you, Linda. Kathleen Walker in New York City is reporting for duty. Hi, Jim. Hi, everyone. And hope you are well. Kathleen. Mary Payne is here. Hello, Jim and all Lovedies. Good to see you as well. Bernadette says, hi, Jim, and hi, everyone. We always like to greet our guests. And Linda in Florida says, love that hat. You are looking handsome tonight, Mr. Lovedy. Is there any way we can print this one out and I can put this comment on highway billboards, perhaps? Is there a way to do that? No? All right. I'll just have to accept that. Thank you very much, Linda. I appreciate it. You sure you have your glasses on? Ann Wozniak. Hi, Jim and everyone. Good to see you, Ann. Merlin is cheering. We appreciate that as well. Cape Cloud is here. Hi, Jim. Looking forward to your interview with Jeffrey. Welcome on our YouTube channel. Anybody watching on our YouTube channel, we would love it if you subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell. We have over 230 episodes of the Jim Masters Show live with extraordinary guests, amazing, insightful conversations. Warmth and friendly nature is what we're all about. We say our show is about light, love, and levity. And I happen to say love and levity a little too fast in the summertime. And I said levity. So ever since then, all of our viewers call themselves the Lovities. They call me Mr. Levity. They call this Levity Hall. If you're joining us for the first time, I do this work professionally in the real world. Television and radio personality, presenter, host, journalist, actor, writer, producer, voiceover narrator, and voiceover artist. I've done this work for a long time. And we launched this show in the springtime nightly, and sometimes 2 shows a day as well, to provide entertainment and inspiration and information for our audience. Hi, Jeffrey. We both love Melissa Manchester from Tennessee. Jane, did you see the conversation I had with Melissa Manchester on the show? If you are on that YouTube channel at Jim Masters TV, actually, it's the very first thing that pops up. We had an extraordinary, almost 3-hour conversation with Melissa Manchester on our show. She was fantastic. Love Melissa Manchester. You can check that out on our YouTube page. With so many other greats. Almost, Jim, you have to say the T as well as Kootser. Good to see you in Juanita Land, which is South Africa. Christine Clifton, greetings, Jim and Jeffrey, all as well. And welcome, Jeffrey, to the show. Glad you're joining the show this evening. You are now a Lovity. I informed Jeffrey about the whole Lovity feel of the show. And he said, bring it on. You know, there's Peabodys and there's Tellys and Emmys and Oscars and Grammys and Tonys, but he knows what it's like to get a Lovity from the Jim Masters Show live. His feet are probably tingling knowing now that he's a Lovity. Bernadette says, welcome, Jeffrey, to Lovity Hall. I'm going to bring him on. And oh, great. You did watch the interview with Melissa. You were both wonderful. Thank you, Jane. I appreciate that. And that's nice, kind of you. And thanks for tuning in. And Jeffrey, so happy you're here tonight. Let's bring him on the show first. There's somebody that says something I would like to hear. I think Ann says, welcome, Jeffrey. Ready to hear all about your life experiences. He also wrote a couple of books as well. And we'll tell you about that in just a second. If you're familiar with him, then you know what I'm talking about. If this is the very first time you're hearing about him, he is extraordinary. He has a split career. On the one hand, as a dramatist, he's been writing plays and musicals that were first produced professionally in 1970, and they've been produced off-Broadway in New York and in stages around the world. Though he's primarily identified with Chicago, he was part of the wave of writers, actors, and directors who transformed Chicago's off-loop theater scene beginning in the 70s. As a writer, a resident writer of the Victory Gardens Theater, he saw 13 of his plays produced there, featuring incredible actors: William Peterson, Amy Morton, John Cryer, Shelley Berman, Gary Cole, and many others. He also collaborated on 2 off-Broadway musicals as well, another based on the hit comedy Love, played off-Broadway twice, featuring at different times with Judy Kaye, Nathan Lane, Austin Pendleton. Austin Pendleton, also somebody who was a guest on our show. And you can go back, and everybody seemed to really love that episode. That was in the summertime that we had Austin on the show, and he was just fantastic. But Jeffrey is our guest, and he's just absolutely amazing, breath of fresh air, because he's been doing this a long time and he loves it. One of the productions also with Austin in that production of Love, David Green as well, and Steve Vinovich. One of the productions was directed by legendary Pat Birch, who went on to direct Sent a Letter to My Love, which Jeff co-wrote with his old friend Melissa Manchester, who we've been talking about this evening. Along the way, Jeff also wrote a couple of 100 hours of television working with Alan Bates and Ellen Burstyn, and of course, Candice Bergen. Remember her, of course, of Murphy Brown and so much more. And he worked with so many others. The other part of his career has been writing about theater. His book, Something Wonderful Right Away, was the first to tell the story of the Second City Troupe and included extended interviews with Mike Nichols and Paul Sills, Alan Arkin, who was also a guest on the Jim Masters Show Live, Joan Rivers, Gilda Radner, Alan Alda, Stiller and Mirror, and many, many others. Another book, The O'Neill, is the story of the O'Neill Center, for which Meryl Streep wrote a foreword, filled with stories of Lin-Manuel Miranda, Bobby Lopez, and Wendy Wasserstein, and so many others. And the founder, of course, George C. White. One chapter devoted to the complicated relationship between Lloyd Richards and a playwright he helped discover named August Wilson. Along the way, Jeff also interviewed Richard Rogers and Peter Cook, Dudley Moore, and James Earl Jones, and so much more. His most recent book, What Playwrights Talk About When They Talk About Writing, is a collection of interviews with playwrights of all kinds. Lynn Nottage, Marcia Norman, Jules Pfeiffer, Lanford Wilson, and so many others. And he also co-edited 11 editions of the Best Plays Annual as well. He's a member of the Council of the Dramatists Guild, as a Tony voter, and an alumnus of the New Dramatists. And he's also a member of the Ensemble Studio. And he's spent much of the pandemic happily teaching 3 classes on Zoom. When I say Zoom, I'm not talking about Boston, Mass. 02134, the PBS kids show in the 70s Zoom. I'm talking about the technology Zoom. Let's welcome the effervescent Jeffrey Sweet to our show live exclusively from New York City. Jeffrey, welcome to the show, my gentleman, and it's wonderful to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So that is quite a repertoire of busyness. How did you first get started? What were some of the things in your life as far as inspirations and early inclinations that you knew you wanted to do this work? You wanted to go into the creative arts and you wanted to get into writing specifically when you were in your youth?
Oh, well, that's easy. For one thing, I was a bit of a ham when I was a kid, and my parents, in order to get me out of the house, sent me down to a place called the Jack and Jill Studios, which was in the Chicago Loop, and I, did shows with them, and I got discovered. And I got hired to do 2 episodes of television for a religious show called Light Time in the studios, which are now occupied by Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, yeah.
Never met her, right? But anyway, so I did that. And the agent said, "Oh, you could do this." And my parents said, "No, we don't want him to do this. Go away." And they chased away the agent. So I was, doing a lot of this stuff in junior high school and in high school, going to see a lot of theater in Chicago. The real heroes for me at the time when everybody else was getting into the Beatles, and I was sort of into the Beatles, but the people I was really interested in were 4 other Brits who wrote and starred in a show called Beyond the Fringe. Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, Jonathan Miller, and Alan Bennett. And they combined insolence with poise. I couldn't hope for poise, but I sure had the insolence. So this sounds like fun. This was during the big satire wave. And at the same time, became enormously affected by and influenced by the team of Mike Nichols and Elaine May. So Mike Nichols, Elaine May, Peter Cook, Dudley Moore, Jonathan Miller, and Alan Bennett were my heroes. And I wanted to, I was growing up in Chicago at a time when there was very little going on in Chicago for people who wanted to write plays. There was Second City, but Second City didn't need writers.
Right.
So at age 17, I went to NYU to study film. One of my professors was some guy named Martin Scorsese. And I arrived at really a great time. Scorsese was there. Paul Simon was teaching songwriting. Clive Barnes was teaching critical writing, and he admitted me to the class. And I was also taking classes with a guy named Lehman Engel, who was the first person to systematically teach how to write musical theater. And my classmates were Alan Menken and Maury Eston, who wrote 9 in the class, and Tommy Newman, who left to go write movie scores. So I was, I joined that group when I was about 18, and I was constantly surrounded by all of these people who were writing and singing. And there was a campus paper and they didn't have a theater critic. And I thought if I became theater critic, could get to see a lot of theater for free, and that worked out pretty well. And Clive Barnes, who was the teaching theater criticism, liked what I was writing, and he actually recommended me for some jobs that he didn't want to take. So I ended up having professional critics credentials when I was like 19 years old, and I was going to see everything for nothing.
That's not bad.
No, it's great. So I got to see all this stuff. And also, I had a friend at NYU named Brett Mitchell, who was going into the acting program, and he and I were writing songs together, and we thought we'd go out and try to sell the songs, and neither of us had voices that would knock anybody over. And he says, there's a girl in my acting class. I think she sings a little. And that was Melissa Manchester. And so Melissa came in and sings a little,
Yeah, right, exactly.
So she would go out, and this is back in the days when you could actually go to get appointments with music publishers and, audition songs. And we would go, and Melissa would sing them. And then one day when we had an appointment, she says, hey guys, do you mind? I've written a couple of songs. Can I sing a couple of songs at this appointment? We said, sure. And so we went, and she walked out with a publishing contract, and that was the beginning of her songwriting career.
Wow!
But Melissa and I used to go to musicals a lot and go standing room because, that was the cheap way to see stuff. At one point, we saw a show that we didn't like very much, and I said we could write something better than that. And she said, "Well, Jeff, someday we will." Mm-hmm. And eventually, we did actually end up writing a show together. So it was an incredible time. And then I had a piece of luck. I've had a lot of luck. I was writing reviews for the NYU paper, and this place called the O'Neill Center was going to start something called the National Critics Institute to train critical writers. And they'd seen my stuff, and they called me up and they said, how'd you like to come to the O'Neill Center? I said, I don't have any money. They said, no, this is going to be free. We're starting a new program. We're trying it out on the dogs. You're one of the dogs. Just come and be part of it. So I went there and was, being taught critical writing by some really good people and seeing some wonderful new plays being developed at the O'Neill Center. But they had a piano on campus. And one day I sat down at the piano. This is going to sound like the Lana Turner sweater story, except I sat down at the piano and I was playing, and somebody stuck his head in and he says, that's nice. I don't recognize it. What's that? And I said, oh, that's some songs from a musical I've written called Winging It, which is loosely based on Aristophanes' The Birds. He says, well, do you have the script handy? I said, well, I can get it to you. So I gave it to him. And then he came up to me at lunch and said, okay, I'm going to produce it this season. It turned out his name was Tunç Yalman. He was the artistic director of the Milwaukee Rep. And on the basis of that, as a special project, when I was 20 years old and a junior in college, I had my first professional production at the Milwaukee Rep because I happened to be playing piano someplace. And that was just,
incredible.
This doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't happen. Yeah.
I was very
no words for it.
No, I wouldn't let anybody see the show now, but I wrote book music and lyrics for that. And, it's juvenile work, but it was juvenile work I enjoyed doing. And between that and a couple of other things, that opened up all sorts of doors. In the meantime, Clive introduced me to a man named Otis Guernsey, who was editing the Best Plays Annual. And this was around the time when Off Broadway was just getting started. And he sent me off to see a lot of Off Broadway stuff. And I remember seeing Hot Old Baltimore in previews when it was in a theater that was above a shoe store on Broadway at 84th Street, being knocked out by that. And it was written by Lanford Wilson. And I had seen one of his earlier plays, a play called Lemon Sky, that was a flop that starred some kid named Chris Walken, and had loved the play. And I'd been following Lanford's work ever since. And so I went to see Hot L Baltimore. It was in previews, flipped over it, liked it so much. 2 days later, while it was still in previews, I went to see it again, and I saw this guy hunched over in the lobby, and I thought, well, that's Playwright's posture. I bet that's Lanford Wilson. So I went up to him and I said, you're Lanford Wilson? He said, yeah. And I said, I want to interview you. Now, all I really wanted to do was to have a conversation with him, playwright to playwright. But if I'd said that, maybe I'd get 10 minutes. But if I say, I want to interview you, he's going to give me time. And he was so new to the game, he didn't say for whom. I didn't have anybody to interview him for. I just wanted to talk to him. But okay, he said, let's do it. So we did it. I did an interview with him. Hot L Baltimore opens, turns into a big smash. It moves off Broadway. It becomes the second longest running straight play in off-Broadway history. And I actually had an interview with Lanford Wilson. So I called up the arts editor at Newsday and I said, you don't have to send anybody to interview Lanford Wilson. I've already done the interview. And he says, okay, mail it in. This is back when there was mail, physical mail.
There was actual mail, right?
But so I send it in. He calls me up. He says, yeah, this is good. We're going to run this. You want to do some more? I said, sure. He says, okay, how'd you like to interview Richard Rodgers?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah.
Why not? And then, interviewed Peter Cook and Dudley Moore and Jules Pfeiffer and a bunch of other people. I'd stumbled into this as a profession. I had never intended to do it. But around this time, I began to notice that a lot of the people who were doing work that I liked all came from one place, which was a place called Second City, which was in my hometown. It was a place where, comedy was developed improvisationally. And I thought, gee, I'd like to read the book about this. And it turned out nobody had written the book. And I thought, okay, nobody wrote the book. I'll write the book.
Yeah.
And Jules Pfeiffer was kind enough to introduce me to Mike Nichols and Alan Arkin. And once Nichols and Arkin talked to me, almost everybody else would. So I spent the next 3 years running around the country interviewing Joan Rivers and Alan Alda, Alan Arkin, Gilda Radner. I got the only interview that Barbara Harris gave in 25 years.
Wow.
And that's what I did for the next 3 years, running around New York and LA. And I remember I interviewed Alda on the set of MASH. And on the same day, I got to interview Paul Mazursky because he was also on the soundstage and I was a kid. I was this kid. I was, some years later, John Lahr wrote a piece about Mike Nichols and he quoted some from my article and and said that he quoted from it. And I dropped him a note and I said, it was a very classy thing for you to do, to acknowledge where the quotes came from. And he said, well, he opened up to you in a way he didn't open up to me. Why is that? And I said, because I was a 23, 24-year-old kid and I was so guileless. He couldn't see I couldn't possibly be a threat, He was talking to this kid.
Little did he know.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's not a lot of. There's not a lot of. It's about the work. It isn't about people's personal lives.
That's right.
But he was pretty open and articulate about where the work came from. And after he talked to me, he said, I've never really talked about this stuff before. And I think I've talked to you and I'm not going to talk about it again for a while. And in fact, for years, whenever anybody asked him, I says, go read that book. And then much to my surprise, whenever I was doing something, he would just show up. Or sometimes he would just give me a call because he wanted to talk about something. I mean, I'm not claiming that we were besties or anything, but every now and then I would just get a call and he would want to talk about something. This was, I guess, the last time I saw him. I had a play called Kunstler playing in the New York Fringe, and I got word that he was coming to see it. And I said, you do realize it's up a couple of flights of stairs. And he and Sheldon Harnick climbed up 2 flights of stairs to this dusty attic in the Village. Loved the play, was deeply complimentary to me and the actors and everybody, and sent me an email, talking about it. And then a few weeks later, my wife came in and woke me up and told me that Mike had died. But he was one of my heroes, and it was a pleasure that he seemed to like my stuff as well. So
yeah. So
anyway, so all this is interconnected.
Yeah, it really is. Like life definitely is. So take us from there. I mean, what happened from there? What was the trajectory after that?
Well, the book came out.
Yeah.
And when it came out in Chicago, on the back cover, it said that I was a playwright. And I was talking to a lovely woman named Joyce Sloan, who was one of the producers at Second City. She says, "You're a playwright?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "Are you any good?" I said, "I have my illusions." She She says, well, I've given a lot of money to a theater called the Victory Gardens Theater, and I'm going to get on the phone and tell them to be nice to you. You get on the number 22 bus and see a guy named Dennis Zacek, and by the time you get there, he will be nice to you. I said, oh, okay. So I got on the bus, and when I got there, he said, Joyce Sloan said I should be nice to you. What have you got? And I gave him a script, and he said, okay, I'll be in touch. And in the meantime, I stumbled into being friends with a wonderful woman, somebody you should probably have on the show, named Nancy Rhodes, who's the artistic director of the Encompass Theater. And we got talking about, her theater does mostly musical theater and opera. And she suddenly and impulsively says, okay, you're going to be my literary manager this year. I said, how much does it pay? She says, nothing. I said, you're going to get what you pay for. But I said, I'll tell you, I don't know a hell of a lot about opera, but I'll tell you something I've always wanted to see. Mark Blitzstein wrote a sensational opera version of The Little Foxes, and I've never seen it. She says, I've never heard of it. And I played it for her. I played the record for her. She says, God, this is perfect for us. So she put it on, and what I had forgotten was that one of the scenes took place on a porch, and my play was called Porch. And I said, hey, listen, on Dark Night, since you've already built the set for my play, on Dark Nights, why don't we just use the same set and put on my play? And she said, okay, I figure it'll cost me about $500. What the hell, for Dark Night.
Yeah.
So we put it on. By this point, Something Wonderful Right Away had come out. And Richard Eder, who was the first string critic of the Times at the time and a pretty tough guy, had read the book. And on the basis of that, thought he would come and see my play. And he gave me a career starting review on the basis of the play. And also the Encompass got a great review for Regina. So this little theater that was upstairs on, I think it was 48th or 49th Street, that was just above a strip club where during the quiet passages, you could hear the bass of the strip music coming through the floors.
The bass of the, you sure it was the bass of the strip music?
No, we never encountered each other, but
was it the box spring?
we knew we were there because in the quiet passages, it's just as somebody was thinking deep thoughts, you'd hear thump 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 underneath.
And I bet a lot of tunes were written based on the sounds they heard.
Anyway, so that. The Times gave it a very good review. In the meantime, Dennis Zacek read the play, and he called me up. He says, I like the play. We'll give it a reading. And I said, you'll give it a reading? I just got a great review out of the Times. Why don't you just do the damn thing? And he said, oh, okay. And he produced it on their second stage, and it turned out to be the surprise hit of their season. They had to extend the run, add seats to the theater. They brought it back to their main stage the following summer. And when he decided he wanted to build an ensemble of playwrights, he asked me if I wanted to be one of those writers. And over the years, we did 13 or 14 shows together. So that was how I stumbled into Victory Gardens. And even though I never lived in Chicago again, I felt like a Chicago playwright because I kept coming back, doing work there, and keeping in touch with other people's work. And I got to see, the Steppenwolf gang when they were non-equity, and hung out with a lot of the Second City people at that time. And it was a great time. I was very lucky because I happened to be I've been in cool places by accident a few times. I was at the BMI workshop when Alan Menken and Maury Eston and Ed Kleban were getting started. I was at the O'Neill Center, and the year that I was at the O'Neill Center, I became friendly with a young actress I thought was going to do pretty well, and that turned out to be Marcia Mason. We've stayed friendly, and Tandy Cronin was there, and I ended up writing. We became friends, and I ended up writing plays for her. Oh yes, also, I was a member of a playwrights group at the Actors Studio that was run by a very competitive playwright who ran it like the Ben-Hur chariot race. So it was as if all the playwrights were in competition, and nobody went out for coffee afterwards.
Yeah.
And I thought, I like to be friends with other writers.
Yeah.
So I left because I thought it was such a poisonous atmosphere. And Nancy Rhodes had a free night, and I said, can I start a playwrights group? She says, sure, why not? Okay, we're not doing anything with the space. So I called up a bunch of friends and said, recommend to me people, talented writers I've never heard of, people that you think, and so one friend of mine, a man named Julius Novick, who was one of the critics at the Village Voice and was teaching up at SUNY Purchase, said, yeah, there's this kid I think has got some talent. I'll recommend him. And that turned out to be Donald Margulies. That's where Donald got started. Of course, he ended up winning the Pulitzer. At that point, I was friendly with David Mamet, and I said, recommend a writer to me. He says, I haven't got a writer to recommend to you, but there's an actress in my play Sexual Perversity in Chicago who I think is one of the smartest people I've ever met, and you're going to want to have smart actors in the room when you do cold readings and to tell you what you're doing wrong. And her name was Jane Anderson. So Jane and I had coffee together, and after 15 minutes, I thought she was so smart and so funny. I said, you're a writer. She said, shut up, leave me alone. I said, why? She says, I can't spell. I've always hated writing. Just leave me. She says, I'll come and cold read for you, but just leave me alone about this writing stuff. So she came to the group, and after about 3 weeks, at a certain point, Donald, not knowing that I had had this conversation with Jane, said, I think you're a writer. Mm. And she looked at the two of us, and she says, okay, you guys, I'm going to prove I'm not a writer. I'll write something. And she brought in a monologue the next week that floored us. And we said, yep, you're a writer. And she's now won the Writers Guild Award and the Emmy. And she's directed feature films and movies for television. She wrote both a play and a film for Glenn Close last season. Wow. The one that the Close was nominated for.
Yeah.
She wrote Frances McDormand's miniseries on HBO. And we said, yeah, you're a writer. Turned out she was a writer. Anyway, also because I'd written the Second City book, I invited a couple named Mark and Barbara Gordon, who had been members of Compass, which was a troupe that came before Second City that turned into Second City. And I invited them into the group, and they said, oh, we've got another couple that we think would enjoy this. Can we invite them? I said, who are they? And they said, oh, Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira. Sure, they want to come. And Jerry and Ann came in and were with us for most of the subsequent 11 years. We just met once a week. We had no budget. We never incorporated. Every month, everybody would kick in $5 to cover the coffee.
Yeah.
And also, Mark and Bobby said, can our kid come? Kid? They said he's 16 years old, but he's a smart 16. And he came in, and he's now one of the leading directors of television, Keith Gordon, who's done just every show you can think of, plus a lot of great indie films. And there were a lot of other people, but it was a great, great, great group of people. And we stayed together for 11 years, and plays that started in that room ended up on Broadway.
Right.
Not one of mine, alas, but Donald wrote Sight Unseen when he was in that group. And of course it did end up on Broadway. So it was a great group, and we taught each other and we discovered things with each other. What
brought you into television too? You've got this prolific background in television and television writing as well.
Okay, that's another strange story. There was a wonderful actress named Margaret Lynn, whom I knew a little bit at the O'Neill Center, and she died young. And the Times had a very kind of tiny, mingy review about obituary of her. And I thought she deserved better than that. So I wrote a note. I said, okay, she wasn't a star, but all of us who, work off Broadway and regionally, we all knew that Margaret Lynn was a great talent. And she deserves to be remembered as being, she was also in the original cast of House of Blue Leaves. And much to my surprise, the Times printed the note. And a couple of days later, I got a call from a woman named Corinne Jacker. And she said, I'm the new head writer of Another World, and you're going to write on my staff. I said, you mean I've got an audition? She says, no, I've researched you. You can write this stuff. And I only found out later that Margaret had been a close friend of hers. And that it was because I had written that letter that she was moved to find out who I was, discovered that I was a writer that she liked, and hired me on the basis of that. So I can't say that's a career path anybody can follow, write letters protesting a mingy obituary, but that's how I got the job.
No, and we're talking about, for those who know the series, NBC's Another World. that he wrote for. What years? Do you recall what years that were? Was it in the 70s
No,
or?
it was early. It was like 79, 80 or 80, 81.
Oh
Something like
yeah.
that. No, it's just it was 1 year.
Oh, so that's when I think wasn't Janice trying to kidnap Corey, and drugged him, and then Ada and Rachel went to find him.
I tell you what I remember was that Elizabeth Franz was our villain.
Oh, that Cecile.
Was that who she was? I don't know. Elizabeth Franz
Maybe.
had played Sister Mary.
My mother and sister used to watch it.
Okay.
Cecile, yeah, Cecile, another world.
She had played Sister Mary Ignatius for Chris Durang, and ended up also playing. I think she won a Tony for one of the Neil Simon plays. But she was the villain, and so
what was that like? I mean, they working on a soap opera, you're pumping out a lot of scripts and a lot of dialogue. I mean, I've always heard that the scripts are like this thick, and there's just so much, right?
Well, here's the staff. You have head writers who come up with the plot, the grand outline of the plot. Then you have breakdown writers who write outlines of what's supposed to happen in each scene, and then you have dialogue writers, and I was a dialogue writer, and I was supposed to write one episode a week. So, which would be about 45 minutes worth of stuff once you took away the commercials and the other stuff. And Corinne hired a bunch of people and said, "I've hired you because you're playwrights, and this is the Proctor & Gamble Playwriting Fellowship. I want you to get very good at this, and I also want you to get very fast at this, because I want you to learn how to write these in 3 or 4 days, and the rest of the time, I want you to be working on your plays." So she said, "If at the end of a year you have not written a play, I will be very disappointed in you." So I took that very seriously, and I worked on a play called The Value of Names. And then Corinne was fired, because people get fired in soap operas all the time, and we all left. And I'd written The Value of Names, and it got premiered at Actors Theater of Louisville, and attracted a certain amount of attention. And then I was hired from that by Norman Lear to create a pilot
with Michael Leonard, right?
No, that was something else.
That was another. Oh wow! Tell us. Well, what was the first one with Norman?
Well, I mean, I barely met Norman Lear. I dealt mostly with intermediaries, and I wrote a pilot which everybody liked, and then it didn't go to pilot, but they said what happened was I did something which they told me you don't do, which is I pitched it to the network, and they made a commitment in the room. And as I was going out, Norman's handler was with me. He says, "Do you know what you just did?" I said, "What?" He says, "You sold it in the room." I said, "Is that good?" He said, "I've been in this business for 5 years. I've never seen anybody sell it in the room." Yeah. I said, "Oh, okay, so that's good, right?" But no, here's the other story. There's a man named Richmond Crinkley who was a producer. He produced The Elephant Man on Broadway, and he was hired to take over the theater at Lincoln Center. And his response was to try to fill the board with big stars. Woody Allen was on the board, and Sarah Caldwell was on the board, and all these people. I never met any of these people, but they were on the board. And he hired Edward Albee to be in charge of the Mitzi Newhouse Theater, and Albee was going to be the artistic director of the Mitzi Newhouse Theater and put up bills of one acts. And so he sent out word, everybody, send in one acts. And so I sent in a one act, and I get a phone call. "Is this Jeff Sweet?" "Yes." "Hi, this is Edward Albee." And I picked up the phone. It's like, "Hi, this is God." "Hi, it's Edward Albee. Like your play, we're going to do it. We're going to do it in a triple bill at the Mitzi Newhouse." And it was a play by me, a play by John Guare, and a play by a wonderful writer who's no longer with us named Percy Granger. Now, Crinkley and Albee did not get along. And Crinkley very quickly decided he was going to sabotage the project. That there were supposed to be 3 bills of one acts that were supposed to go up within the season, and he was determined that there would be only one. And so Crinkley did everything he could to make certain that the plays would not go over, and he was pretty successful. So my play was put up. I thought it was miscast with wonderful people, but just the cast wasn't right. And Kevin Conway directed, who hadn't directed much before. I liked him very much, but I thought the set design was wrong. But everybody told me, you're young, you've never had anything, you're being produced at Lincoln Center, shut up. So I shut up. And the play was put on, and it didn't get great reviews. But a man named Anthony Page came to see the play, and for some reason took a shine to it, and I got a call from him, and he said, okay, this is convoluted. He said, I am going to be directing the TV movie version of the play Pack of Lies by Hugh Whitmore. Hugh Whitmore and I do not get along. He's just left the project. I have a script I can't use. I know from your play that you can write decently for women. We've got 2 scenes that are particularly difficult. Would you come in? We'll pay you 10 grand to write 2 scenes. And I said, sure.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
So I wrote the 2 scenes. I had seen Pack of Lies, the play, and had been intrigued by it, thought it didn't quite work. But just on my own, I had thought, why didn't it work? And I'd been solving the problems for myself just as a mental exercise. And here, by total coincidence, I'm being asked to write 2 scenes for a film version of Pack of Lies. And I thought, gee, 10 grand for 2 scenes is, they're paying a lot for kind of a little. So I wrote up 10 pages of notes of how I thought the script could be improved. And I said, you're going to hire somebody else in London to rewrite the script. If any of these notes are useful, please make use of them. It's been a pleasure to be helpful. And I get a call from Anthony Page, and he says, no, you're the guy who's going to rewrite it in London. I said, what? He says, no, you're going to rewrite it in London. You're coming to London now. Come to London. You're rewriting it. So I find myself with an office in Pinewood Studios, writing a network TV movie.
Wow.
And we've got Ellen Burstyn and Alan Bates and Terry Garr. And I'm working with Anthony Page, who's this legendary director of the British stage, who's worked at the National Theatre and was literary man, and worked at the Royal Court. And I'm having this tremendous time doing this, writing it. So what happens is that they ended up shooting my script, and Anthony said, I don't think that the Writers Guild rules are going to allow you to get credit as co-author or as author of the script. He says, can you think of another credit you'd like? I said, sure, call me creative consultant. So if you watch the film, it's on YouTube, you'll see creative consultant. But it's my adaptation of Hugh Whitmore's script, including all the improvements that I put in that I found out later Whitmore absolutely hated. Hated every one of it. So anyway, Whitmore had the right to sign his name to my script, and he so hated it that he signed a pseudonym, Ralph Gallup, and Ralph Gallup was nominated for an Emmy Award. So, and it won a Peabody Award and all sorts of things. And word got around that I was the guy who wrote that, and I started getting assignments to rewrite TV movies, and also people commissioned me to write scripts, none of which were ever made.
Were you enjoying that? Were you enjoying those years doing that?
I was, partially because I fell into an interesting pattern. 2 of the scripts that I wrote as TV movies, one for Court TV, and then Court TV went out of business, so they had no use for the script. And another one that I wrote for an independent producer who loved the script but couldn't sell it, and said, some people are interested in it, but only if it gets rewritten and watered down, and I'm not going to ruin it. Here, do with it what you want. So both companies gave me the scripts to do with what I wanted, and I turned them into plays. One of them was The Action Against Saul Schumann, which played in Chicago and ended up winning the American Theater Critics Association Award as the second best play to premiere regionally. And the other was a play called Court Martial at Fort Devens, about a group of young black whacks in 1945 who were court-martialed when they got into a fight with a racist colonel. And I wrote that as a play, and it was done in Chicago, where it was nominated for a Jeff Award. And I thought, I'm not going to prepare a speech because my competition is something called August Osage County, and I'm not an idiot. Of course.
Yeah, of course.
But the play was published in a magazine for high school kids called Dramatics, and I got a call from a man named Woody King Jr. And he says, "You don't know me, but I've just read your play, and I run this theater, and I want to produce the play." And I said, "I know you. You're Woody King. You're a legend. I've been watching your stuff for years. Of course I know you. You know, you discovered Denzel Washington. You did for Colored Girls. You know, one of the legendary black producers in town." And I said, "But do you know who I am?"
Right.
And he says, "I know you're white. We're doing the play anyway." Because it was a play, it was a chunk of Black history that I had discovered. It's a story that nobody had ever heard of about these women who not only were court-martialed in 1945, but they beat the system in 1945. Usually these stories end tragically. In this case, it turns out they won. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a story in which, they win in 1945?
Right.
And I found this on like page 15 of a March 1945 New York Herald Tribune when I was researching something else. Literally, nobody knew this story. And it led me to, at one point, I went to the Library of Congress and I'm opening a box of the NAACP's files from Boston, 1945. And there's a letter in there that says, "If we do not receive satisfaction from the courts on a lower level, this will be my next case," and signed Thurgood Marshall. So I am holding this letter from Thurgood Marshall that nobody has looked at for more than 50 years. And, I have to write this story because if you discover a story that if you don't tell that story, nobody's going to hear about it.
Right.
So I wrote it. And the New Federal Theater produced it. It was nominated for 7 Adelco Awards and it won all 7. I was delighted and honored because I felt the community was telling me that I hadn't screwed it up,
Right.
that I had done it right, that I had captured the voices. I mean, I had transcripts from the court martial that helped guide me. I don't think I do it now. I think that times have changed, and I think that but at the time, I mean, it took me about 20 years to get that story right. At the time, researching, getting court-martial transcripts and all this stuff, it was a great adventure to find a great story and that nobody knew and to tell it. And that led to friendships with a whole other group of people. I've worked with many of the people I worked with in court-martial ended up working with me subsequently because I met all these amazing actresses. So I've been working with them a lot. So
have you kept in touch with a lot of people over the years?
Oh,
Who still? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, these are, I didn't come from a really tight family, so this is my family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I've been friends with Tandy Cronin and for 50 years. Alan Menken and I, we don't hang out that often, but we certainly are pleased to see each other when we run into each other.
Were there any writers or journalists in your family?
Yeah, my dad had several degrees in history and ended up being a PR writer for the University of Chicago. He wrote about science. And he always wanted to be a novelist, but he sort of thought that maybe he would support his family, which since I was his family, I appreciated. My mom was a violinist, classically trained at Juilliard, but in order to make a living, she played in the orchestra at the Radio City Music Hall and for A Song of Norway, and was also in Frank Sinatra's orchestra at the Paramount Theater and played on his V discs.
Wow.
And she didn't like popular music. She was a real snob. She liked classical music. But I said, "So how was Sinatra?" Because, you hear all these stories. She says, "Well, I don't know what he turned into later."
Yeah.
But at the time, he was so kind. He was so nice to the members of the orchestra, particularly the women in the orchestra. He took us all out to dinner. He would somehow manage to get nylons for us in the middle of the war or stockings for us in the middle of the war. And she said, and the stories that he didn't know how to read music weren't true because a batch of us taught him how to read lead sheets. He may not have been able to read a full score, but he could read from a lead sheet. And we liked him very much. She said, she said that he once said to her, I'm not really a singer. I'm an actor who sings.
That's how he thought of himself, huh?
But that's what he told her.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, and my dad, to touch base with another interesting figure, my dad went to work in Washington and became friendly with Chief Justice Earl Warren, and ghost wrote a couple of speeches not ghost wrote, but co-wrote with Warren a couple of speeches. Warren gave 2 speeches which were read as anti-McCarthy speeches, and my dad had a hand in those speeches. And Earl Warren said, "Listen, I like you. Let me be helpful to you. Ask me for recommendations." My dad was so shy, he never took him up on it. My dad was a very quiet, very shy man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they were, obviously, your parents sort of set the stage and were big influences for you, huh?
They were. I mean, I had, classical music on one side, and I had my dad as a writer on the other. And then, as I said, they sent me off to Jack and Jill Studios to get me out of the house. Yeah. And then I stumbled into acting and all the rest of that. So, but my mother did not want me to go into the business. She hated the business.
Did she?
And, she saw what it did to some people.
Yeah.
And
were you hesitant at all hearing that from her? No, you knew what you wanted to do.
I knew I was a writer from about age 6 on.
Did you really?
I really knew that was what I was going to do. So I was going to do some kind of writing.
So in school, did you write for like the school newspaper and all of that?
I wrote plays and musical for my high school. I did all that nonsense. Not nonsense. It was great. I had great fun and I learned stuff, as well as acting a lot in school. And I didn't want to continue acting because I knew that there were 80 million people who would be better actors than I would. But whereas writing, I thought I could be competitive.
How about writing music as well? Songwriting, yeah.
Yeah, I was doing that. I learned enough from my mother to learn how to notate and to learn basic principles of harmony. Plus, I had this sort of I had a pretty good analytic ear. I could see how stuff was built. And on the basis of that, I auditioned for Lehman Engel. I was 18 years old, and he says, "Okay, come on in. You're in." I think I may have been the youngest person to be admitted in the BMI workshop in its history. I'm not certain. At the time I was admitted, I was the youngest because I was 18. And at that point, Lehman was telling me I was going to write, book music and lyrics for musicals. Now, none of the shows that I ever wrote music for ever, in fact, were done off Broadway or in New York. I basically gave up music because, again, if you can write with Melissa Manchester, who's a better composer than I am, why would I want to write my own stuff?
She said something interesting, and I wonder if it works for you as well. I asked a couple of other guests this question. She said that in our conversation on the show, she said when she gets an idea, no matter whether it's just something that flies into her head, or she wakes up from a dream, or she sees something across the street, whatever it is, she needs to immediately run right to the piano and start playing and record it, take an actual cassette recorder and actually record it, because she said she's got to capture it as it's fresh, as it's happening now, because the longer she waits and the more distance she has from the germ of the initial idea, it starts to morph, dissipate, fade, and then sometimes even go away. Yeah. Do you find that too, whether it's you have a brilliant idea to write something? Yeah,
if something occurs, you just go straight to go straight to the computer, you go straight to the keyboard, although I find that the ideas happen when I'm at the keyboard. I begin to improvise at the keyboard. Writing is a great deal of fun for me. But it was great fun writing with Melissa. I remember at one point we were working out in LA, and I was staying someplace else. I wasn't crashing at her place. And she was kind of irritated with me because although I had a driver's license, I didn't drive in LA. And I arrived by bus at the base of the hill where her house was. And she was going to sort of punish me for being a pedestrian. I was going to have to climb up the damn hill to her house. we were supposed to write the song, this one song that day. And as I was climbing up the hill, I was writing the lyric. And at the top of the hill, I was drenched in sweat. And I said, okay, give me a legal pad. And I wrote the lyric. And I said, can I take a shower, please? So I hopped. I hopped in the shower after giving her the legal pad. I got out of the shower and she played me the song.
What was the song?
It's called something about going to meet a friend. It's a double meaning song.
Right.
This woman thinks that she's meeting some guy that she thinks is, just is a pen pal. And the guy is under the illusion that this is a woman who's been writing him very sexy letters, and that he thinks this is going to be the consummation of the relationship.
He's the one, right? Yeah.
So she's cheerfully singing along this chirpy song, and he's interpreting everything as being an innuendo. It's a very funny song.
So, how many years did you and Melissa collaborate?
Well, from when we started to when we finally got the full realization of the show was about 10 years. We did an early version of it at primary stages, but we didn't quite get it right. And we were working on it some more. And then we did it in a staged reading at a place called New Tuners in Chicago. And it's funny because we've been sending the script around and we had not been getting a lot of great responses on the script. It's a weird show. And after the first performance of the reading, a guy came running up to us and said, okay, I see it now. We're doing it next year. And it was somebody who had already rejected the show.
Ah, wow.
He says, now that I see how the show works, I've got to do the show. And Melissa and I just looked at each other and went, whoopee, and went and got, took a beer, grabbed a beer. And then it was done I'm blanking at the name of it was this music theater in the Round outside of Boston. And we had great orchestrations by Doug Besterman and Larry Blank, who were the best in the business. We had
is your mind drawing a blank?
And we had Diana Canova was in it, and
yeah, sure.
David Garrison was in it. I'm suddenly blanking on our leading lady, and she was brilliant. She co-wrote Pump Boys and Dinettes.
Mm.
She was the Feed the Birds woman in Mary Poppins, and she was also in Bridges of whatever it was, that Bridges of Madison County.
Madison County, yeah.
Her name, and she's brilliant, and I'm suddenly blanking on her name, and I feel stupid because she was great in the show.
Yeah.
And we loved it. We had a wonderful time. We loved the production. The music was a little adventurous for Boston ears. Not
quite Arthur Fiedler.
Well, she was really stretching. Her father was a bassoonist at the Metropolitan Opera.
She mentioned that when she was on, yeah.
So she grew up not only with pop and classical and with Laura Nyro and Paul Simon, whom we both loved.
Right.
But she also grew up with Leonard Bernstein and Samuel Barber and Aaron Copland and all these influences. And she wrote a score which reflected this incredible literacy that she has and range that she has. It's a very rangy score.
Yeah.
Some of it almost operatic. I think it's some of the most adventurous writing. I think it's one of the, I'm really objective, but I think it's one of the greatest debut scores I've ever heard from a composer. I just was blown. I think I'm pleased with my work, but I think her work is just so moving and so melodic and so extraordinary.
Some people are saying Meryl Streep or Jane Darwell.
No, I'm talking about. The only time I've ever worked with Meryl Streep was she wrote the introduction to a book of mine. That was it. And I interviewed her once for a project that never came together.
In the television world, you also, for folks in that soap opera genre there, worked From Another World first, then on to One Life to Live, right?
That there was a year of that, yeah. And the great pleasure of that was that we had a casting director who was in love with theater actors, and we kept getting great actors on that show, and you could write for them. Like I mean, I didn't meet Wally Shawn there, but I was, I got to write scenes for Wally Shawn and Patricia Elliott. Patricia Elliott was, won the Tony for A Little Night Music, and was somebody whose work I admired enormously. So it was great fun to write for really good people. That's the real fun. To me, the reason why you write is so that you can get into the rehearsal room to hang out with actors.
Speaking of which, we have several fantastic photos where that has actually occurred. Here's one.
Oh, yeah, that was our off-Broadway production of Flyovers. That's me in the lower left. Behind me is Donna Bullock, a fabulous actress who took over Mother after Mara and Maisie left in Ragtime. Next to her is the late and amazing and brilliant Kevin Geer, who probably acted in more plays at the O'Neill Center than any other actor and was one of the original stars of Sideman. Next to him is Michelle Pock, who, of course, won the Tony Award for the play that Harold Prince directed based on Carol Burnett's childhood, and and is also just a good buddy. She's a fabulous actress. And that's Richard Kind. And Richard and I are friendly from Second City. And I showed him the script, and he read it, and he said, "Who else is in it?" I said, "Michelle Pock." He says, I get to play a romantic scene with Michelle Pock." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "I'm in," because he, as a character actor, he almost never gets to play romantic scenes. And and he and Michelle had starred in what was the original title of Road Trip, the Sondheim show that was done in? That was done in Chicago at the Goodman Theater. It didn't come on. But anyway, they were friends from that, and he said, I said, "You realize there's next to no money in this." He says, "I get to play a romantic scene with Michelle Pock, who needs money."
Yeah.
And I said this to Michelle, and she says, "That's okay, fine. Thank you for telling me. I'm good with this." And they played the hell out of it. I mean, it was one of the greatest groups of actors I've ever worked with. They're all bloody brilliant. That was a joy to work with them.
Yeah. Here's another. Ed Asner. Yeah.
Well, Asner and I actually worked together one time, and I wasn't even there for it.
Funny how that happens sometimes, right?
Well, he was a fan of a play of mine called The Value of Names. That's a play about the aftermath of the blacklist that gets done a lot. In fact, it's in rehearsal for a Zoom production at Theater Ariel in Philadelphia right now. And for a while, Jack Klugman was obsessed with it, and he did it in 6 theaters.
Yeah.
But Ed liked the play a lot, and he wanted to do it one night. And he and Howard Morris, if you remember Howard Morris from your show of shows, started, said, "Can we do it? Can we do a reading one night in L.A.?" And I said, "Sure." But I wasn't in LA. I was someplace else. And they said, we'll do it. We'll do you proud. And they did it on September 10th, 2001. And 9/11 was the next day. But which is how I remember the date. But Ed and I have stayed friendly because Ed was a member of that gang that turned into Second City. In fact, he and Mike Nichols were roommates at the University of Chicago. And I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
Ed was doing a play on Broadway some years back. I'm trying to remember the name of the damn thing. It was a 4-character play. I'm blanking on it. But anyway, we were going to go back. My wife and I were going to go back and say hello to them, and say hello to him. And we were standing online, and also online was Mike. And because he's polite, he waits online. He waited online, and we were looking down the hallway, and Dan Loria, who's a friend of mine, was in the room with Ed. And he said to Ed, "Oh, Jeff Sweet's here." And Ed said, "Looking forward to seeing him." And Mike turns to me and goes, "I'm chopped liver." Anyway, we get down to the end of the hallway, and we're in Ed's dressing room, and Mike is sitting there, and my wife and I are standing in the doorway, and there are a couple of people sitting on either side of Mike. And one of them is a guy who is a surgeon who is just filling the whole room with talk about how brilliant it is to be a surgeon. And he says, "I'm a surgeon, but you know, the medicine we do is nothing compared to the medicine I saw you do on that stage tonight." And Ed sort of gives me a kind of look. And finally, after the surgeon has left, it's Mike and Ed and oh, come on, who's the guy who wrote? I'm suddenly blanking on his name. Moonstruck. John Patrick Shanley's there too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Ed and me and Shanley. Shanley's very quiet. He's just standing along, aside, looking amused.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed and Mike turn to me and say, "You know, we were roommates in the University of Chicago 63 years ago." And I said, "Wow, I'm 63." And simultaneously they said, "Fuck you," which I took as a compliment.
I guess they couldn't be any more specific than that. Oh my God.
You know, it was a friendly, collegial.
It was a very, yes. That means that's their way of saying I love you.
Yes. So that was a hoot. I mean, I could go bluer and tell you the time when Ed and I ran into Lewis Black in front of the West Bank, but that would be very blue indeed.
That would be a whole other. That'd be the after midnight crowd.
I think so. These guys had never met each other, and as soon as they saw each other, they started insulting each other comically in the most obscene terms. Standing there, listening to them call each other every name in the book.
And with love. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, instant respect. Yeah.
Who's with you and Ed there?
Oh, that's Amy Stiller.
Oh, okay.
That's you know, Amy's. It's Ben. You know, it's Ben's sister, and it's Ann and Jerry's daughter, and Amy's an old buddy, and was in a couple of my writing classes. We stay friendly. Amy's a much underestimated actress. I wish. You remember Thelma Ritter?
Sure.
She's today's Thelma Ritter. Anybody who's saying, "Jesus, I wish we had a Thelma Ritter," Amy can do that. And you know, because Amy came out of an improv family and Ed came out of that improv world, he just said, "Well, you know, you're like my niece. Come here, niece," and that was that. We happened to be in the same place where Ed was doing a reading, and he was holding court, and he's, "Come here." All right.
And it almost looks like she's saying, "Oh, Mr. Grant."
Yeah. He might hit her with that stick if she said that.
Yeah. Mary Tyler Moore. Oh, yeah. Richard Thomas. Yeah.
Well, it was Richard Thomas and me bookending Lanford, who I think probably after he saw this photo wished he'd had a comb.
A little alfalfa.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
But Lanford was a big influence on me, and the Dramatists Guild every year for a number of years gave Lifetime Achievement Awards, and I was asked to co-produce the Lifetime Achievement Award that year for. It was held at the Lambs Club, and Richard said he would host. So because doing 5th of July on Broadway and then for television, he said saved his career, because until he did 5th of July, people thought he could only be John Boy.
John Boy from the Waltons, yeah.
So he said doing that was, and so I also am a little friendly with Laurie Metcalf, and I said, "Laurie, do you want to come to this?" And Laurie, you know, her breakthrough had been doing the Steppenwolf production of Balm and Gilead, where she did that extraordinary 25-minute long monologue, which, you know, the day after she did it, everybody in town knew her name and knew that she was one of the great actresses of our time. So she said, "Would I have to do anything?" I said, "No, just come sit at the table, have dinner with us, and, you know, just be there to you know, be friendly with Lanford. He'll be delighted to see you." So I wrote this speech for Richard, talking about all these actors. Judith Ivey was at the table too, because Judy won her Obie Award for doing one of his monologues. Batch of us at the table, and I said, and who can forget, you know, Laurie Metcalf in Balm and Gilead. It had been 25 years. The entire audience burst into applause for a performance they remembered from 25 years ago. And Laurie, who was just recovering from having a show flop under her on Broadway and was very depressed, all of a sudden went, oh, there's life after this, after all.
Mm-hmm.
But theater lovers have long memories, and that performance in Balm and Gilead was extraordinary, and that evening was extraordinary. Lanford was an amazing writer and a great influence, and it was a great treat over the years to just sit and talk craft with him. Um, I love talking about playwriting with playwrights. You'd be surprised how rarely that happens. Mostly playwrights talk about alimony and agents and real estate. And I had this excuse to talk to a batch of playwrights. I was commissioned to write a book. Let me see if I think I've got it. Do I have a copy of it here?
You mentioned
I have a copy of it. Here we are.
Celebrating shows that have, were years and years ago, and then sort of revivals. They're playing our song. Robert Klein, Lucy Arnaz had just had that recently, pre-COVID, and it was as if they had never, been apart, which is amazing.
Klein also came out of Second City. He's in my book. We had a 50th anniversary party at Second City back in what was it, 2009, I guess it was. And I was there, and Klein was there, and David Steinberg, and I don't know who all, Jim Belushi, and Stephen Colbert was there, and Martin Short was there. It was a big bash that lasted 3 or 4 days, and I kept being mistaken for other people. Somebody came running up into me and said, "Oh, Michael, you're looking so well." And I said, "Maybe it's because I'm not Michael." And and then somebody came up to me.
They think you were famous people?
Well, actually, the person who ran up to me, I'm blanking on her name, was a famous person who thought she remembered me as Michael Gelman, who had taught her at Second City. And Gelman was an old friend of mine, and we both have high foreheads. And I said, "I'm not," and she went, I mean, literally, this is, I'm blanking on her name, and she's a movie star who had a TV show, and she came up and she throws her arm around me and she says, "Michael, you're looking wonderful." I said, "Thank you, I'm not Michael." And she goes, "Oh," and scampers away. Then somebody else came up to me and said, I really admire your work, Mr. Klein. And I said, do you think I'm Robert Klein? You aren't? No. And they walked away. And then I ran into Klein. And I said, "Just curious, has anybody mistaken you for me?" And he said, "No." I said, "Yeah, I didn't think so."
Maybe now a little Harry Reasoner from 60 Minutes. Maybe that.
So, but the Second City community is a family. I mean,
show us that book too. You were showing the book just a second ago.
Oh, this is a different book. This is when I was commissioned by Yale to do a book of interviews with playwrights, and it's Edward Albee and Lanford Wilson, Jules Pfeiffer, Lynn Nottage, Chris Durang, Donald Margulies, Jane Anderson, some wonderful British writers, David Hare. And I said, "You're going to pay me to have conversations with these people? God, that's great." So I spent a year running around having these great conversations with these great people. And
is that book still available?
Oh, yes. And it's available in a Kindle edition. It's called What Playwrights Talk About When They Talk About Writing. And Ken Davenport named it as one of the books playwrights must have. And I didn't even pay him for that plug.
Have you done an audiobook version of it?
No, I mean, because it's their voices. And also I edited it into chapters. You don't publish raw transcript. You have to build the chapter. But,
Judy Wales said that she knows of you, and she said, "Are you still writing for TV?"
No, once you get above a certain age, TV doesn't want to know from you. I have a friend named Ken Levine, who in fact is one of my playwriting students, which is crazy to me. But Ken Levine wrote for MASH, Tyler Moore, and Cheers, and Frasier.
The best, yeah.
He's legendary.
Sure.
And I said, "Why are you studying with me?" He says, "Because I wrote on instinct, and you're a technician, and I want to know I want to know technically what I did instinctually." I said, "Okay, but why don't you start a class and I'll come study with you?" But
they're not using people of that ilk so much anymore.
Unless you're a superstar or you're a producer, an executive producer. I mean, if you're Norman Lear, you'll work. He probably has a contract which goes 3 or 4 years after his death. You know,
Or like Stephen J. Cannell was, and some of the others. Yeah.
yeah. If you become a big executive producer and have and that,
An
but
Aaron Sorkin type, or yeah.
but most writers are there's a great deal of ageism in television. There is a little bit of it in the theater. It's going to be harder now for me to get my plays done, even though my most recently produced play was very successful. But I'm, you know,
So you're finding that even in the theater community as well.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Because everybody likes to discover the new person. There's great, enthusiasm for discovering new people, and I love to discover people too. So I understand it.
Yeah.
But there are also some people who are long distance writers. At the National Theatre in England, they don't throw Carol Churchill out of the theater, or Alan Bennett, or David Hare, or Tom Stoppard.
So this is an American phenomena?
I think Americans are particularly hung up on youth.
Youth, and yeah.
And, we've got to find somebody fresh and new. And I think it's great to we have to constantly have people who are fresh and new, because they're going to bring new imagery and new ideas in. But there's something to be said of having people who have a memory of knowing what happened before the immediate moment, who have some sense of perspective in history.
I agree.
Orson Welles, when he was young, was very angry at the way Hollywood was treating John Ford. He said, this man is one of the great artists of our time, and they're making it difficult for him to make movies. And he's a great artist. And, with one eye, he can make a better movie than
anybody else. Yeah.
But if you take a look, Billy Wilder was not allowed to make a film for the last 20 years of his life. Maybe the greatest writer-director of sound movies we ever had. Paul Mazursky, for the last 15 or 20 years of his life, was not allowed to make a feature. Great filmmaker. So
Norman Lear is really a rarity then.
But Norman Lear is a producer who owns his own production company and is insanely rich.
How about Neil Simon when he was doing his thing?
Well, Neil Simon did it as long as he could, and then age started getting to him. And at the point when age started getting to him, he stopped writing. But he wrote for a very, very long time, and wrote very well for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
There's Terrence McNally.
Did you guys your paths cross, you and Neil Simon?
I met him once. Hi, nice to meet you. I met a lot of the old guard, most of them briefly. A few of them I had conversations with. I had a very short conversation with Tennessee Williams.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
I had seen him act in a play. He had acted in one of his own plays, a play called Small Craft Warnings, in which he stepped in and played the part of an alcoholic abortionist. And he was pretty good. So I was introduced to him at a party, and I said, I saw you in Small Craft Warnings, and I enjoyed your work. I said, do you think you'll ever act again? And he said, well, maybe if I write another part for a dirty old man. That was our conversation.
And you said,
you don't top a joke that good. You just don't top a joke that good. That's a great Tennessee Williams joke.
You just say, yes, sir.
But because I did a lot of interviewing, I got to meet many of my heroes. Sidney Kingsley was a hero. I got to meet him. A great.
Was that anything you ever thought of doing? Where you would have had your own show, or been on any of the major interview shows, or any of that type of thing, or had even maybe your own talk show, Dick Cavett type thing, or something?
No. I don't think I've got
the opportunity came. Would you have considered it?
If somebody offered me a podcast or something like that, I'd be interested in doing it, as long as the financing were in place and the technical stuff. But I'll
forget about all that.
Yeah.
You're going to do it out of your bedroom.
Yeah.
All the rest.
But, somebody to help or produce. Yeah. I'm not. I'm a good interviewer off camera, and I think I'm a reasonably good interviewee. But I don't think that I would be a great. I don't think I could do what you do to a standard that would make me happy.
I appreciate that. Very kind.
So
you say that,
but
you've certainly done enough to please many. Here's another shot.
Oh, that's William Peterson. playing in flyovers in Chicago. Here's a funny story. William Peterson and Amy Morton had been a couple together for a number of years, and then they'd had a big fight and broke up. And then Amy married somebody else, and Billy married somebody else. And Billy kept trying to figure out a way to become friends with Amy again. And he read the play, and he said, oh, great, this is a play I can do with Amy. And that's what happened. It was they did the play. It was a big hit in Chicago. It won the Jeff Award for Best Play. And on the basis of that, they became friends again. And she subsequently directed him in some plays, because Amy's not only one of our great actresses, she's also a terrific director.
Mm.
But it's
What
fun.
was happening here in this photo?
He's on the back deck. It's a little bicycle that his kid. We never see the kid, but he's this is the bully who's going to try to blackmail the guy into by getting him into bed and getting a picture of him in bed with somebody, trying to blackmail this guy with his wife. And then it turns out that the wife had walked out on the guy, and he didn't give a crap whether he showed the ex-wife, a picture of him in bed with another woman or not. So this is the bully, and in rage he beats. I'm telling you the whole plot of the play. But
you're a good conversationalist.
But the point was, even though I think this guy ends up being kind of a crummy guy behaving badly, I understand his frustration, because he's been working in a factory which was acquired by a big corporation out east. The corporation acquires the factory, figures out that it can save in taxes if they close down the factory, and they've shut down the entire town. So he's got no work. The entire bloody town is broke. There are a number of towns where this was happening to, and he's furious. He's furious because these smartasses in New York and on Wall Street, in order to make a couple of bucks of paper profits, have put him and his friends all out of work. So as far as he's concerned, anybody who comes from New York is part of that system, and they're fair game. So he's taking his revenge out on the corporation, on this guy he used to know, who's gone to New York and become successful. So this is, as I say, I think in a sense it anticipated some of Trumpism.
That's right. I think you're correct. Yeah, absolutely. Precursor. I like this. I love this shot of you. What was happening here, Jeffrey?
Oh, well, that's a solo show I did.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another story. I told you that there was the 50th anniversary of Second City.
Yeah.
And as I was coming home, I was reading in the New York Times an account of what I'd just been part of. Mm-hmm. And nowhere in the account was there any mention of Viola Spolin, who invented the improvisational theater games that were the basis of the training for Second City, or Paul Sills, who created Second City.
Mm-hmm.
And I started writing a letter to the Times saying, not talking about Viola Spolin and Paul Sills in an article about Second City is like writing about the Bible and not mentioning Moses or something.
Yeah.
And I started writing this letter. In the middle of writing this letter, I got an email from Mike Nichols, who said, "Did you see that goddamn article in the Times?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?"
Yeah.
He didn't want to write the letter because he didn't want it to look as if he was throwing his weight around, I guess.
Right.
But he thought because I had written, the book about Second City, that I was the person to write the letter. And I wrote to him, I said, well, in fact, I'm writing the letter. And he said, good, because somebody should know this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sent the letter in. They didn't publish it. And I thought, well, how do I get the rest of the story out? I mean, I've written the book. And then I had this idea of doing a solo show about Second City, about my writing the book, about being a member of that community, and also about the larger story about how Second City was born out of all these people who came, all these Russian Jews who escaped the Tsar and Stalin, who came here, and their children created American satire.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much true. If you take a look at American comedy, a good 2/3 to 3/4 of American comedy came out of people whose parents had escaped from Russia, Jewish. The entire staff of your show of shows for Sid Caesar.
Oh yeah.
Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, Neil Simon, Larry Gelbart, all these people. So I did this show called "You Only Shoot the Ones You Love," which is a quote from one of the great directors and a lunatic who was a friend of mine named Del Close. And I did a solo show. I performed a solo show in the New York Fringe. And what was pleasing? Oh, yep.
I love that. Oh, yep.
That's that. Oh, that's a
That's that.
that's a little clip of it. It's a little dark, so I wouldn't inflict it on your on your on your audience.
Yeah.
But
We'll show a little bit of it. It's about 9 minutes, but we'll show a little bit so they can see you doing it.
Well, maybe start somewhere in the middle.
Not where it says your name.
Well, no. It's in fact the first 3 or 4 minutes of this clip I cut out of the show, so it doesn't start there. I mean,
tell us about the show so they know. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. The show starts off with me being in Evanston, Illinois, and being in love with New York and wanting to go to New York and getting to New York, and then finding that I wanted to find out about a theater that was in Chicago, which was the town I had just left. So I'm running around interviewing all these people, and I talk about some of the interviews, and I talk about some of the people, and then after that, I just became part of the family and ended up being invited to all these events.
Yeah.
And it's my stories, with Paul Sills and Del Close and Sheldon Patinkin and Mike Nichols and Elaine May and all these people that I got to know, I'll tell you a funny story. Turn this off, and I'll give you a chunk of it with better lighting. Okay.
You want them to see you doing a little of it? I started at the 3-minute point, and we moved it up.
Let me suggest that you turn that off, and I'll do a bit of it for you here.
Which you do it. Oh, that's even better. Do it live. Yeah. Okay. Like Bill O'Reilly once said, "We'll do it live. We'll do it live."
Okay. At the end of the show, I talk about how I was hired by Yakov Smirnoff to help him work on a solo show, and we were working in Chicago. And Yakov turns to me and he says, "Jeffrey, is there anything funny in Chicago?" And I said, "Yakov, Second City." He says, "Second City, what is that?" And I said, "Yakov, you're in comedy and you don't know what Second City is? I mean, it's Tina Fey, it's Stephen Colbert, it's Mike Nichols, it's Robert Klein, David Steinberg, Joan Rivers, blah, 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 blah." He says, Jeffrey, calm down. All right, tonight you and I, we will go to this Second City. I said, "Yakov, we can't just show up at Second City. They've opened a brand new show the other night. It's a hit. It's sold out. We will not get in." He says, "Jeffrey, not to have too big a head, but I am Yakov Smirnoff. We will get in." I said, "Well, okay, Yakov, if you're that, I'll string along with you." So we get to Second City and we're standing on line. There's there's a red rope and the lady with the clipboard with the reservations. And we get to the front of the line and she says, "Tickets, please." And Yakov says, "Well, I have no tickets." But, and she says, "Well, gee, how do you expect to get in? It's a theater. We use tickets." And he says, "Well, but I am Yakov Smirnoff." And she says, how nice for you, but in this theater, we use tickets. "I'm sorry, I'm sure you're very important. And if you call the..." And then she says, "Wait a second, Jeff, is that you?" And I say, "Yeah." And she says, "Oh, sweetheart, we have seats for you." And we're being led to seats on the rail, which is, like the seat of honor. And Yakov is gobsmacked. He turns to me and he says, "You are more famous than me?" And I said, "Yakov, in this zip code, I am more famous than you." And we get seated at the rail. And as I'm watching wonderful people doing wonderful comedy, I'm thinking about how there's a phrase that says, "Home is the place where if you show up, they have to take you in." And I'm thinking, well, they don't have to take me in, but they do take me in. And that's how the show ends. It's, Second City became a home. So I do this show in the Fringe. And I'm invited to do one night at the Barrow Street Theater. And I'm coming out to perform. And, you know, it's half light in the audience because I like to see the audience because I'm telling them stories. As I come out, I'm seeing Edward Albee in the audience. And I'm going, oh, great. I'm going to try to do stand-up in front of Edward Albee. I mean, it's not stand-up, but, you know, I'm going to try to make Edward Albee laugh. But he's there with Arthur Coppett and Gretchen Cryer, who's an old friend. Gretchen's son, John, was in one of my plays, as a matter of fact, and Kia Corcoran, who's an old friend. And so it's, you know, and they're all members of the Dramatist Guild Council, which I'm a member of. So it's like performing for friends. So the performance goes very well. And afterwards, Edward comes up to me and says, very droll, Jeff, very amusing. But that last story, that Yakov Smirnoff story, you finessed that a little, didn't you? And I said, actually, Edward, that's word for word exactly the way it happened. Really, Jeff? Really?
Linda says, such a cool clip you recited. And June says, tell Jeffrey that Matthew Arkin was on the show here. We were both in Sheldon's class in New York.
Well, Sheldon Patinkin ran a class before he went back to Chicago to help with Second City and help found Steppenwolf. And I was in the class. And when I was there, Adam was there too. Adam Arkin was there. So I've known Adam and Matthew a little bit for a number of years. And Sheldon was the one who, when he heard I was doing the book, he called me up and he said, I hear you're doing a book about Second City. Have you ever improvised? And I said, well, not really. And he says, well, how the hell do you expect to write this book if you've never improvised? How would you, this makes no sense. He says, you're going to come to my class and I'm going to teach you. So I went to his class and he taught me. And it turned out that everything that he taught me about improvisation and building scenes absolutely applies to playwriting. Playwriting theory.
A few things, that you picked up from that.
Well, I mean, some of this stuff is so basic. Other actors will go back. Will go. Really? It took somebody to tell them that. But things like pursuing an objective, that a scene is based on characters pursuing objectives with some energy, and whoever pursues the objective in a scene with the most energy sets the agenda of the scene. Also, if you put an object in the scene, you can negotiate over the object, and you will find out who people are through the way they negotiate over that object. In fact, I was just watching Godfather 2 recently, and almost every scene has a good object in it, and that's what they're negotiating over. So I began to realize that all these improvisational theories have direct analogs to playwriting theories. And I started adapting these ideas and coming up with theories of my own that extrapolated from that. And that's how I teach playwriting. So I teach playwriting as an extension of acting. I don't think it's a literary form.
So what would you say about somebody like myself who tends to humanize inanimate objects, especially things like lamps, chairs, and instruments?
Well, that's not quite what negotiating over an object is. Negotiating over an object is, for instance, when in Godfather 2, when Lee Strasberg are playing the old gangsters on the roof of a hotel in Havana, and they're having a birthday party, and they've made a big birthday cake for him. And he's saying, everybody take a piece, as they're talking about how they're going to divide up the territory in Havana. And somebody brings him a slice of cake and he says, smaller slice, please. And you think, this man has never wanted a smaller slice of anything. But the idea of smaller slice, please, the cake being there, illuminates his false humility. But in the scene just before, as all of as Batista is there with all these American businessmen talking about how they're going to carve up Cuba for the American corporations, they're passing around a solid gold phone that AT&T has made for him. And as they're passing around this phone, a solid gold telephone. So there's a great object there. Brando loved objects.
Yeah.
Do you know the story about the final scene in The Godfather and how that came to be?
Tell our audience.
Well, it's the great death scene. Brando is the old man sitting in the garden with his grandson. And he suddenly calls out to Francis Ford Coppola and says, "Francis, I have an idea. Can I try it?" And Coppola says, "Better do it quick. We're losing the light." So Brando, who's been peeling an orange, turns his back and puts the orange into his mouth and makes monster teeth and turns around and goes, "Gah!" Well, it's a real little kid who scared the shit out of huge Marlon Brando with orange monster teeth. And that's just Brando using an object. And of course, you think, oh, the kid is frightened of his grandfather because he thinks he's a monster. And then you think, well, he's killed an awful lot of people. Maybe he is a monster.
He is a monster.
But Brando did this all the time. The famous glove scene in On the Waterfront was an accident. Do you remember the scene where he and Eva Marie Saint are walking along, and he's sort of shyly talking to her, and she drops her glove, and he picks it up, and instead of handing the glove back to her, he takes the glove and he takes the schmutz off the glove, and while her back is turned, she turns away to look away, he puts her glove on. And she spends the rest of the scene trying to get the glove away from him. They say not a word about the glove. Now, you can analyze that scene of him trying on his feminine side, whatever you want to analyze it. Sure. But it was an accident that happened in rehearsal, and Elia Kazan said, "Do it for the shoot." And people don't remember a word of the scene. They just call it the glove scene. And that's why you hire Brando, because he will find an object and make the scene great. Or even in Missouri Breaks, he does it. Do you remember Missouri Breaks? He plays this gangster gunslinger, and he's killed this man. And there's a funeral for this man. And Brando's got a toothache, and he's sort of nursing his tooth. But he breaks into the funeral. And the body of the man he's killed is in this casket, which is filled with ice because it's very hot. And Brando comes in, and he says, "This man didn't have to die. He didn't have to die. If he hadn't wised up in my face, he didn't have to die. If he hadn't wised up in my face, why, he'd be sitting up right now." And he reaches in, grabs the body, puts it on his knee like a ventriloquist dummy. He turns, using it like an object. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine. How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing fine." You're doing all this as the mourners are freaking out. He lets the guy go. The dead guy flops back into the casket, and he picks up a piece of ice and presses it against his sore tooth and leaves. Brando. Now, the thing is, you don't have to wait for a great actor to come up with an idea like that. You can put the objects in there and pay them off. Believe it or not, that's a technique. And if you look at The Apartment, which was written by Billy Wilder and I.A.L. Diamond and directed by Billy Wilder, they're the most brilliant uses of objects throughout that. One scene after another in which the objects pay off, and the way people use them. There's one point where this woman looks at a Christmas card and realizes that the guy she's been seeing on the side is never going to leave his wife. And there's another point where he looks at her cracked mirror and realizes that she's been sleeping with somebody else, and it breaks his heart. And they don't say a thing, and yet it's one of the greatest scenes in movie history. And that's a written scene. They put in a hat, a broken compact, and a Christmas card. You read both of their minds, both of their hearts break in the scene. They never say a word on point. Brilliant writing. And that's negotiation over objects. I mean, there are a lot of techniques. There's negotiation over space. There's violation of ritual and convention. There are all sorts of technical things that you can do. I'm a great believer in technique. I think you can have all the inspiration in the world. I can't teach somebody to write a good play, but I can keep them from ruining a good idea.
Absolutely.
I can teach you enough technique that you won't ruin a good idea, or you'll have a better shot at it at any rate.
What is it when you do humanize inanimate objects? Is there something to that? I tend to do that a lot. I give lamps, chairs, instruments, certain things, almost human qualities.
I think you should be working at Pixar.
There you go.
That's it. Or the candlestick that Jerry Orbach played in Beauty and the Beast.
Very hard to throw out a chair when you've given it human qualities.
Yeah. Listen, I've got books I can't throw out because they're suffused with the sort of sauce of memories. I've read the books and I'm not going to read them again.
They're all behind you.
Yeah. Well, some of them.
Well, that's the other thing with our show, because I know you've been watching the show and I appreciate that. And you said you enjoy the show. People love to know the room, kind of like, what was the name of the series with Edward R. Murrow, where he'd be sitting back?
You Are There.
You are there.
Person.
And now we're going to go into the home of Jerry Lewis, or Lucy and Desi. Tell us the room that you're in right now, Jeffrey.
Okay. This is an apartment on the Upper West Side across the street from a coffee shop called the City Diner, where in normal times I spend a great deal of time. It's a 2-bedroom apartment, a condo, which I got back when I was writing television. On good days, when non-pandemic, there's the luxury of a swimming pool and a gym upstairs, so it's very nice. And it's in a terrific neighborhood where lots of other actors, writers, and directors live and regularly run into each other. So I'll run into Heather McRae or David Auburn or Reed Birney. Reed was in one of my plays, or Michael McKeon. And Annette O'Toole. Annette directed one of my plays, and actually was in a show of mine back when we were both just out of our teens, back in 1972 or 73. We hadn't seen, when I ran into her, we hadn't seen each other in years, and she was doing a strange play in which she had a beard. A musical with Southern Comfort with Jeff McCarthy, and I saw her for the first time backstage, and she still had the beard on. And she said, "Haven't changed that much, have I?"
Now, the room that you're in, is that like a library or your study?
Half of the living room is my office. One half of the living room is enclosed with bookcases, and it's my office. There's a wall of plays over there, of anthologies of plays and the scripts by a lot of other people. I'm involved in a really interesting project for the Dramatist Guild right now. The Dramatist Guild is going to have its 100th anniversary, and it's going to be a project honoring the playwrights of the first 100 years of the Dramatist Guild. So I'm going back and reading a lot of forgotten plays and a lot of forgotten writers, and we're going to try to figure out a way to introduce contemporary people to great writers who wrote important plays of the past, whom nobody remembers. For instance, I'm going to name a name, and let's see if you remember this name. Have you ever heard of a woman named Rose Franken?
I think I have. Tell us about her.
Okay. Rose Franken created a character named Claudia. Claudia was in short stories, novels. She adapted the Claudia stories into a play, a hit play, which she directed, Rose Franken. Then it went to movies, and there were 2 Claudia movies. Then Claudia was a radio series, and then it was a television series. Claudia was in every possible medium, storytelling medium that existed in those days, except maybe opera. Okay, and nobody remembers her. But she obviously, by creating this character, Claudia was sort of like... was a little bit like Lucy in that she was very exuberant, and she was a new bride, and very exuberant and a little immature. And there was something about the character and about how the character grew over the years, that there was this incredible bond between her, the audience, and this character that lasted through 7 or 8 novels and movies and radio shows, all this stuff. Well, nobody remembers Rose Franken. And she's one of the people that, as I was researching the past and the writers of the past, I went, she had an astonishing career. Franken also wrote for the movies directly, and nobody knows who this person is. But there are less obscure people that people don't know. Like nobody seems to, when I say Sidney Kingsley, very few people know who Sidney Kingsley was. But Kingsley invented genres that turned into the mainstay of television. He invented the hospital show with a play called Men in White, which is about the politics of a hospital. He won the Pulitzer Prize with that play. It helped establish the group theater. Nobody remembers Men in White, but St. Elsewhere and Chicago Hope and all those hospital plays, hospital TV shows, would be unimaginable without Men in White. Then he did a play. He decided there must be a play in cops. So he went and spent a year hanging around police stations, and he wrote a play called Detective Story, which was a huge hit play, became a hit movie. And without Detective Story, you probably wouldn't have had Hill Street Blues or any of the other shows about what happens inside police stations. He literally invented genres, and he wrote a play called Dead End, which is about juvenile delinquents in New York and about how the neighborhoods create juvenile delinquents. They made a movie out of it, and the kids who played the juvenile delinquents were called the Dead End Kids, and the Dead End Kids were spun off and had their own series of movies. And when they switched studios, they became the Bowery Boys.
The Bowery Boys, that's right. And then the Little Rascals, no?
Well, no, there's no relation to the Little Rascals came before.
That was before.
But the point is that this man, Sidney Kingsley, had a huge impact on the business. He had 2 or 3, I think maybe 2 Pulitzer Prizes, hit movies, hit plays, some of which he directed. He invented genres that people are still making a living off of, and very few people know who he is.
You mentioned Rose Franken.
Yeah.
There she is.
Yeah. And you know the funny thing is,
Claudia.
There he is. She's not that sexy in the books, but but the story is, I was looking at an old article about her in the New Yorker, and literally she started writing because somebody accidentally delivered a typewriter to the wrong address, and it was her address. And she said, "Oh, a typewriter. It's a sign from God. I should write." And she started writing, and she became this best-selling novelist and hit playwright. She had another hit play called Another Language, which I just found a copy of, which I haven't started reading yet, which was made into a hit movie too. So this is my reading for the next couple of days, is to read more Rose Franken.
Who are some others, along the way that have inspired you?
Well, I mean, I can tick off some of the usual names. Lanford, I've already said. Everybody's inspired by Tennessee Williams and William Inge and Arthur Miller. Thornton Wilder was a big influence on me, and when I said that, it turns out that Thornton Wilder was a big influence on Albee, on Donald Margulies, on Lanford. I remember saying to Lanford, everybody says that you're a Chekhovian playwright or a playwright who's been influenced by William Inge, and I said I see Thornton Wilder in there. He says, "You're right. Why do you think Thornton Wilder?" And I said, "Because you've got the same playful attitude in relationship to the audience, which Wilder was kind of pioneered." He says, "You're dead right." He says, skin of our teeth was a huge thing for me. And I said, if he can do that, I can do that. So there are certain writers that give you permission to do stuff. I've been very impressed by Elmer Rice, whom nobody seems to remember, but he wrote a play called Street Scene, which was turned into a terrific movie and was turned into a terrific musical with a score by Kurt Weill and Langston Hughes, and Kurt Weill won the Tony for it. It was the first Tony for music for the theater, and that is a sensational score. And Elmer Rice is a really interesting writer. You know who else is nobody remembers and was a huge writer in his time was Maxwell Anderson. Okay, I told you that I was co-editor of the best plays for 11 years. The playwright who had the most plays to be named best plays in that series was Eugene O'Neill. The playwright who had the second most plays listed in that series was Maxwell Anderson. And who remembers Maxwell Anderson? Except not only did he have hits with plays like Elizabeth the Queen and Winterset and what's the name of that one about the murderous child with that was in the 1950s, became a movie, The Bad Seed.
Oh yeah.
Okay. He also was a lyricist, and he wrote the September Song with Kurt Weill. He also wrote the movie The Wrong Man for Alfred Hitchcock, which is one of Hitchcock's best films that people don't know about. And he co-wrote All Quiet on the Western Front, the original movie. This man had an amazing career, writing all sorts of things. Sometimes he wrote in blank verse, Anne of 1,000 Days, which was made into a movie with Richard Burton. And nobody remembers this guy. He wrote some stinkers too. He wrote a play called High Tor, which was terrible, which was turned into a TV musical starring Bing Crosby and Julie Andrews. And you can see it on YouTube. And Julie Andrews looks terrified. She knows the material isn't very good, and she's working with Bing Crosby, and it's just at the beginning of her career, and she doesn't know what she's doing, and Crosby is just sort of pushing her around and guiding her through, and sort of say, and it's a terrible show. But but he wrote a lot of great stuff too.
Yeah.
There are a lot of really interesting people that
You
we have forgotten.
you mentioned Jeff McCarthy, I believe, and we have a clip here. Is it Kunstler?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Okay. I have to tell you how this came about. William Kunstler was one of my heroes. In fact, I met him very briefly in Atlanta. I was sitting at a table after a day of teaching, and Kunstler is down for a theater festival for some reason. We're sitting at the same table, and I'm thinking, this guy's one of my heroes, and I'm so tired I can't say anything to him. I've been working all day, and just sitting there, you know, beating myself up. Of you have a chance to meet this guy whose history, and you can't say a word. And that's the way the evening went. And then, eventually Kunstler died. And his daughters, two of his daughters, made a great documentary called "Disturbing the Universe." Great documentary. And I was watching it, and I thought, William Kunstler looks like Jeff McCarthy on a bad day. And I thought, I wonder if Jeff McCarthy would like to play William Kunstler. So I called up Jeff, who I had worked with when we were doing workshops of that musical with Melissa, and who's an old friend. And I said, I think you would make a great William Kunstler. Who's William Kunstler? Jeff didn't know. And I told him where to look up watch the documentary. He says, yeah, I can play this guy. And I said, okay, well, if you're game to play him, let's see if I can get the rights to use some of the material from his memoirs. And we ended up with two of Kunstler's daughters, the two daughters who had made the documentary. We were sitting in a booth at the Waverly Inn, which is the booth where their father used to sit when he met his clients. And they look at Jeff and they say, yeah, we can see that. Yeah. Okay, tell us how you would do this. Would this be a solo show? And I said, no, I don't think so. I think my idea is that he is coming to give a lecture at someplace like Columbia University, and a young black woman who is on the hospitality committee is stuck introducing him because the head of the hospitality committee has been called away at the last moment. And she's the one person who voted against inviting him to give a talk because she's mad at him. But she's going to try to be gracious and introducing him. And he realizes that she's got some attitude about him. And at the same time, he's telling us all these stories, he's trying to win her over. So one of the stories that Kunstler was involved with, I'm assuming that a lot of people have seen the movie The Trial of the Chicago Seven, the Aaron Sorkin movie, where Kunstler is played by Mark Rylance. It's a good movie. That's not Kunstler. Kunstler was very funny. Rylance is glum all the way through the movie. His daughters say, we like the movie. We don't. Rylance is, does what he's supposed to in it. But our father cracked jokes all the time. Where's the humor?
Yeah.
So Rylance did what he was supposed to do, and the movie's very good. He's meant to be the designated adult in that movie. He's meant to be the person who's checking Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. But I wasn't stuck with having to have Kunstler fulfill that function. I could present him as the very funny guy he was. Having said that, this is not a funny section. So maybe people remember something called Attica.
Mm-hmm.
Attica, there was a revolt in the prison of Attica, where a number of prisoners took hostages, guards, and people who happened to have been visiting at the time, and held them prisoner, and wanted to negotiate to get better conditions in the prison. And one of the people they wanted to be on the negotiating team was Kunstler, because they'd heard about him from the Chicago Seven. Kunstler was there, and Bobby Seale was there, and the editor of the Amsterdam News, one of the editors for the New York Times, and they were all there. And so this is a chunk of the Attica section, and it's you won't see the student in this chunk. The black law student.
And this is actor Jeff McCarthy doing this.
Doing a piece of this.
All right. Let's enjoy.
physics, maybe you remember from high school, in physics there's something called PE, potential energy. Say like you got a big spring and it's all coiled and compressed and quivering. There's a restraining force holding it in, but if that restraining force is dislodged, blam. Scientists actually know how to measure this restraining force when you're talking about a spring or a volcano or a roller coaster about to drop down an incline. It happens in people too, of course, the force building up inside. The pressure created by rage and frustration, and it builds and it builds. I don't know that scientists have a way of measuring this in people, but it's the same idea. If that restraining force is dislodged. We now come to one particular restraining force. It's a gate. A crowd of 20 or so inmates, riled up by a run-in between a guard and a prisoner that flashed and escalated, they begin to pull and bang on this gate. Now, this gate I'm talking about is supposed to be held in place by a steel rod. The rod is supposed to go 6 inches into both the ceiling and the floor, but when they were building Attica, the rod in question is made too short, so comes this day in September, and these guys are yanking and banging on this gate. The rod in question snaps at the weak point. The gate flies open, unleashing all of this energy that is potential no longer. 3 guards are nearby. The prisoners pick up broomsticks and baseball bats, and they visit their rage on them. From here, the prisoners get a hold of a set of keys, and they end up controlling much of the prison, including one of the yards, D yard, and they take hostages. Guards and some civilians who have had the bad luck to be there. So now they got hostages, they got something to negotiate with. Something to make the authorities talk to them, and they want to observe us as part of this, which is how I get the phone call and why I take that flight. We're escorted into D yard, which is this huge open space, where they've set up a table, and that is where we sit. This table, facing them, facing something like 1,200 men. Each of us has to make a statement. When it comes my turn, I look at this huge crowd of men who have seized power from a system that has systematically degraded them. And I'm hit with the full weight of the fact that they've asked us to be there, asked me to be there. One of them, a man named Flip Crowley, he seems to recognize me from my run-ins with Judge Hoffman, my contempt citations. He says, "Hey, brother Kunstler, what'd they do to you in court?" And I go, "Oh, the same thing they did to you, brother." And we hug, and there's this cheer, and suddenly by acclamation, I'm asked to be their lawyer. In the flash of one moment, I have 1,200 clients.
And that's it. Not many jokes in that piece, but but it's a tour de force performance by Jeff.
Yeah,
and we had a really kind of interesting experience with this. I wrote this, and Jeff put together, got a reading of it up into Barrington Stage, which was very useful. And then it made its debut at Hudson Stage in Westchester. We got a lovely review out of the New York Times, but nobody picked it up. And then I put it up in the New York Fringe. Jeff wasn't available at that point, but I'm suddenly blanking on his name. He's a great actor. He was the president of Equity for a while. Driving me nuts. He's gonna, if he sees us, he's gonna hit me over the head. Wonderful actor. And it'll come to me just after the broadcast. But Jeff recommended this guy. He played the corporate big guy in the stage version of Network with Bryan Cranston, the guy who gave that remarkable speech.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I should know his name. He's a wonderful actor. And he was also in Catch Me If You Can. Anyway, it'll come to me right after we finish talking. And he came in, and I did this in the New York Fringe. And one of the actresses was a friend from a terrific actress named Gillian Glasgow. She was from one of the people from Court Martial. We put it up for next to nothing, and it went over like gangbusters. That's the show that the Mike Nichols came to see. And somebody stepped forward, a wonderful woman named Patricia Snyder, and her husband Bill had a production outfit, a non-production outfit called The Creative Place, and in partnership with a company that my wife created called the Ann Theater Company. Ann Theater was associate producer, but the Creative Place were the lead producers. They raised the dough to run it at 59 East 59th Street. We did very well there, and then we were invited up to Barrington Stage to do 4 weeks. And that went well, and so well, in fact, that they asked us to come back and do another several weeks at the end of the season. So we had to put the set back together and go back into rehearsal for the final few weeks. And Jeff, who's kind of a real favorite up at Barrington, just had a tremendous response to it. And there's this one woman who kept showing up, and she introduced herself, and it was Karen Kunstler.
Mm.
And Jeff said, "Karen, you've been to see the show 8 times. Why?" And she says, "Oh, Jeff, I missed my father." So it was running. It was running in a lovely production down in Florida when COVID shut that production down. And we're hoping post-COVID that it's a 2-person play, pretty cheap to produce, and with a nice track record. So we're hoping that it'll have a continued life afterwards. But it's been very interesting, because when you write a play about a real person, all of a sudden the people who knew him start showing up.
Yes.
So he was one of the early defenders of the Central Park Five. And one of them came to the show last night, the day that I was there, loved the show and chatted it up. And Kunstler's former law partner loved the show and talked about it. And his office manager and people who had tried cases against him came to the show and, told their stories. There's something... I had a bit of this experience when I did the play, The Value of Names, because it was about the blacklist and all these people who had been blacklisted. This is back in 1982 when a lot of them were still alive, came to me and told me their stories. And because they said, "We like your play, here's what you didn't know." And then I sometimes incorporated some of what they told me into the play.
Have you been inspired at all by anything that you've witnessed, experienced, observed, with everything that we have dealt with from, say, late winter, early spring of last year, whether it's civil unrest, political, economic, the pandemic? Have you been inspired at all to write about any of these things that we have dealt with globally, as well as individually as a people?
Not directly, because every other writer is looking at the same material and they're all going to write about it. We're going to have 15 imitations of The Odd Couple of people who are stuck weathering the pandemic together. That's going to happen. People who are about to divorce, who because of the pandemic have to stay together and rediscover their love, or newlyweds who because of the pandemic are stuck with each other and as soon as it's over will flee each other.
But do you see something even larger just about the social aspects and how we've dealt with adversity and any of that, like a larger view of this whole thing?
Well, those are values that I think I had in place before this happened. I don't write propaganda plays, but I have my ideas and my values, and they're going to inform anything I write. Ironically, the play that I was writing as the pandemic hit and that I finished is a play which I haven't placed yet. It's called The Meantime, and it's about a young gay man who was growing up in a small town in the South with his parents, had a bad relationship with his father. He goes to Atlanta. He thrives in Atlanta, finds a partner. He and his partner start a business that do very well. And in the meantime, now that he's an adult, back in the small town, there's this flood that wipes out his parents' business and half the town and their home. And the parents have a choice. They can either go into FEMA housing or they can accept their son's invitation to come and stay with him and his partner in their fancy townhouse in Atlanta. And the mother wants to do it and the father doesn't. And so this idea of people who, because of larger circumstances, suddenly have to reevaluate their lives because they're going to have to, they're forced together because of, in my case, it's the flood that wipes out the town, as opposed to a pandemic that, destroys all social intercourse in this, person to person conversation. I felt that I had written a play that was very much to that. I just happened to be finishing it just as the pandemic hit. So,
how have you been dealing with everything that's been going on? How have you been keeping creative and positive and sane and connected through it all?
Well, I've been very lucky. For one thing, I gave a talk online for the Dramatists Guild, and out of that, a lot of people said, "Will you teach a class?" And I'd never taught online. And one class turned to 2 classes, and 2 classes turned to 3 classes. And then I said 3 classes is my limit. I'd kind of like to keep some time for myself. But I've been enjoying teaching the 3 classes enormously, and I find that in some ways teaching online works better than teaching in person. Playwriting, I think there are other things that you have to teach in person, but playwriting has been, I've been very excited, and I have this community of people who I like very much, whose work is exciting, and we've made a lot of progress together. So I've been doing that. Plus, I have a group of people that meet on Thursday nights who are improvisers and playwrights. And this came out of a group that I started years ago. Do you know who Dan Castellaneta is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Dan's an old friend from Second City. He and his wife, Deb. And I had this idea, because improvising and playwriting are very similar. This is not a new idea. A lot of people have had this idea, that you could develop plays through improvisation. And a friend of mine who has a big, beautiful house in Cape Cod said, "My husband and I would love to support something artistic. We're going to give you the house for 1 month each summer, and you invite people and you do this." So for 1 month every summer, we get a group of 10 or 12 people together and we improvise based on each other's suggestions. So let's say you have an idea for a scene and you cast me in the scene. Anything I do is a gift to you. Anything I do is yours, because I understand that when I have an idea for a scene, if you do a scene based on my idea, anything you do is a gift to me.
I love that.
Okay, so here's a story. We were raising money for Dan and Deb were with us for the first 2 years, and then they decided they like this process so much they run this now weekly out of their house in California. But the second year, Deb was working on a play called Old Man in a Car, and for some reason she asked me to play the old man. And the idea was that this guy really shouldn't be behind the wheel of a car. He drives his car through a plate glass window and destroys a restaurant, and his family kind of thinks maybe he shouldn't have a car. All right, and I'm happy to do it. All right, some years later, we're raising money for Kunstler, and I get a call from Winnie Holtzman. Winnie Holtzman wrote the book to Wicked and is an old friend of mine and is an improviser. And she told me once, and I don't remember doing it, but she told me that I may have introduced her to her husband, the actor Paul Dooley. Paul Dooley's from Second City, and he's an old friend of mine. So she said, you introduced us. I think, the least we could do is, kick in a couple of bucks in your show. And we said, thank you very much. And I said, so what are you guys doing? She says, oh, Paul's about to open in a show. I said, what? She says, well, you've never heard of it. It's a new play. I said, oh, really? What's it about? And she said, well, it's called Old Man in a Car. I said, what do you mean I've never heard of it? I was the original Old Man.
I was the old man.
That's Deb LaCusta's play, right? She said, how do you know that? I said, I improvised those scenes. I said, some of what Paul is going to be doing is stuff that I improvised. And similarly, I have a wonderful friend named Catherine Butterfield, who's a terrific actress and playwright. And she was working on an idea of a play about two adult children whose mother is dating a much younger man, and they think they should intervene, that she's maybe being taken advantage of by the younger man. And so the son picks up the daughter at the airport, and they're driving on their way to the mother's house. And Catherine says, that's all I've got is this idea of this scene. And Dan and Deb get up and they improvise this scene brilliantly in the living room of this house in Cape Cod. And 3 years later, the play opens off Broadway, and the first scene is 50% what Dan and Deb did. This stuff works.
Yes.
So we took it online now. And every Thursday we're doing it online. And my new play, I've got people from Second City. Also have Jeremy Carrican, who co-wrote Lifespan of a Fact. I've got John Hancock, who directed Bang the Drum Slowly, the movie. I've got Barbara Dana, who starred on Broadway and was with Second City. I've got unknown people that I think I discovered. A woman named Teresa Cox, who I found online in one of my online classes, who lives in South Carolina, and I still never met in person, but she's so bloody gifted. And I said, I think you have to be a member of this group. And every Thursday we get together and we help each other build plays. And
I did something similar. It was with our friend June, and it was really, really cool. It was something that they do. Obviously, they didn't do it this year, but hopefully in 2021 they'll be able to. The Writers' Colony at the Goodspeed for Goodspeed musicals. And we went and we stay overnight for a couple of days in your own little condo apartment. And then everybody gets together and they pitch ideas and they bounce them off each other. And June and I were at that with Pepe Castro and a bunch of other fabulous people. And that was so phenomenal to experience that.
Well, theater's a social art. It really is. I mean, playwrights are sometimes the least social because a lot of our work is done separately. But I enjoy writing, but what I really enjoy is rehearsals. I enjoy being in the same room with other people and seeing stuff that I've written be transformed into something better by great actors. And I've had the great luck to work. I sometimes say I've worked with some of the world's greatest actors on their most obscure projects. I've worked with amazing people, Oscar winners and Tony winners who come and do something with me. A, because it's going to be a short schedule, and B, because they like the piece and they want to work on it. So, and it's just more fun than you can say to be in the same room with funny, smart people and build stuff. I saw that some people were posting questions, which I haven't seen at all. Have you been keeping track of any of them?
Well, actually, Linda wanted to know, of all the plays and the work that you've done, do you have a tier of favorites, the things you're most proud of, the things that really, you feel it right here? Do you have
the musical with Melissa, I was thrilled with. Flyovers, I'm very proud of. The Value of Names was a breakthrough for me. The Action Against Saul Schumann did really well, and an extended one-act play that started my career, really, Porch. Those are the ones that you're not supposed to have favorite children, but those are the ones. Those are the ones that I instantly know. There are other ones that I did that are, I'm proud of, like American Enterprise. But that was a hard play to write, and I think it turned out well. But it was like fighting a war for 3 or 4 years, getting that one right.
Now, when you look at comedy versus drama or any of that, do you have a preference? Do you prefer dramatic versus comedic?
No, I write the story that I want to see next. I've written very silly stuff. The musical What About Love is very silly. And Action Against Saul Schumann, somebody told me, is a tragedy.
Yeah.
But usually my comedy is not silly. Usually there's some gristle underneath there. There's some meat in there. On the other hand, when I'm watching one of my plays, what I'm watching for is when the next laugh is coming. I know it sounds cheesy, but even when I'm watching a drama, I'm going, okay, when's the next laugh? So I can see whether they're really with it. So, if it's the middle of the drama and then a funny line comes and they laugh, I go, oh, good, they're still with it. Because that's the only time you can really tell if you've absolutely got people, is how they respond to the jokes.
What was the play that took the longest to actually write and rewrite and just really perfect to where you were pleased enough to say, okay, now we can present it?
Well, that was court martial at Fort Devens. Was 15 or 20 years from the time when I saw that article in the 1945 newspaper to when it reached its final form off Broadway. That was 15 or 20 years there. But I did other things in the meantime, but I couldn't let that story go. I said I felt a responsibility to tell that story. If I didn't tell that story, what those women did would not be remembered. And in fact, because of that play, it triggered some historians picked up on that, and now there are references in subsequent books to that story. In fact, there's a whole book about it, about that story out, which footnotes my play as, oh yeah, somebody wrote a play about this too. Yeah, I wrote that play 5 years before your book came out.
So what are some of the things that inspire you? Are you an observer of life? Where do you get this inspiration from, where it triggers enough meat to be able to say, okay, we're going to run with this idea?
Well, sometimes it's, oh, this is a great true story that nobody's ever heard. I like looking through the back pages of old newspapers. That's where I found Court Martial at Fort Devens. I also like, that everybody has something that they're keeping at bay, something that they're afraid of, or some contradiction that they're trying to keep from ruining their lives, And, almost all of us can think of the thing of, oh, I hope that person doesn't show up, or I hope this doesn't happen because this way. So I'll give you an example. I had a friend whose father was blacklisted. A very famous dancer was blacklisted. And her whole life growing up was how the American public went from lionizing him, and he was a huge star, to her father couldn't make the money to pay the groceries, and they escaped to Europe. And I think it formed her character somewhat, that she mistrusted people after that. Anyway, I ran into her on the street and I said, "What's new?" She's this beautiful singer dancer, gorgeous. And if you're watching, yes, I think you're a gorgeous singer dancer. And just somebody I love enormously. And I said, "What's the news?" And she said, "Well, I've just been cast in my first Broadway show." And I said, "Fabulous." And then I thought, gee, her father was blacklisted. What would happen if the director of her show turned out to be somebody who named names, or maybe named her father? And I said that to her, and she said, "Well, the director did not name my father." That didn't happen. I said, "But what if?" And she said, "Well, my father is very waspy. He would probably just repress it and say nothing and let the steam come out of his ears." And I thought, well, that's not a play. And I thought about my own family and my mom, who's explosively Jewish. And I thought, if this were a Jewish family, they'd say something. So I wrote a play based on that, on the idea. There's this young woman whose father was blacklisted. Her parents broke up when she was young, and she's been raised by her mother, but she's been cast in a play which is trying out in Los Angeles. And her father lives out in LA. Her father, after the blacklist, managed to get back into the business again, playing crazy neighbors on a sitcom. And, he says, "Come stay with me. We can make up for lost time." So she's staying with the father she does not know terribly well as she's rehearsing this play. In the middle of the rehearsals of the play, the director takes sick, and he's replaced by a new director, and the new director is the guy who named her father. Wow. And she says, she's trying to figure out, do I stay with the play or not? Now, believe it or not, I started working on this play, and it turned out that what I was describing is very close to something that happened. Do you know the story about the out-of-town tryout of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum?
Tell us. It's
one of the great showbiz stories. Okay. Funny thing happened on the way to the forum. Was out of town in Washington and was having trouble. The audiences weren't responding. The reviews weren't very good. And George Abbott was directing, and he couldn't figure out why the hell the show wasn't working. I mean, they had Zero Mostel and they had Jack Gilford and the song, this great score by Stephen Sondheim. Why the hell wasn't this show working? And somebody said, who probably could help us fix this would be Jerome Robbins. And somebody said, yeah, but we can't bring in Jerome Robbins. Well, why not? Well, because Zero Mostel hates Jerome Robbins. Mostel was blacklisted and Robbins named names. And so the producers said, yeah, but maybe he could save the show. Why don't we ask Zero? So they go to Zero Mostel, and Zero Mostel says, we on the left do not blacklist. Bring the shithead in. So they invite Robbins to come and work on the show. Well, there's another twist to this. Robbins, at one point, when he was, experimenting with being straight, dated a young woman. And then he decided he was gay, but he and this young woman were very friendly, and she used to take him out dancing, and it's where he learned popular dances. And this young woman married Jack Gilford, who's the co-star. And Jack Gilford goes home to his wife and says, I'm thinking of dropping out of the show. And his wife, Madeline Gilford, says, why? And Jack says, they're bringing in Jerry Robbins. How can I work with him? He named your name in front of the committee. He damn near ruined your life and ruined our marriage. How can I work with this schmuck? And Madeline says, so you're thinking of dropping out of the show? He says, yeah. She says, this is the best part you've had in years. It's a part that could make you a star, but you're thinking of dropping out of this show. And he says, well, you got to stand for something. And Madeline said, that's right, Jack, you go ahead and blacklist yourself. And Jack stayed in the show, and Jerome Robbins came in and said, the show's great. You've just got the wrong opening number. Do you know what the original opening number for Funny Thing Happened was?
No.
Love is in the air, quite clearly, people everywhere act queerly, summer limping, summer halting, summer simply somersaulting, love is going around. Now that sets up a romantic musical. And Robin says, you're making the wrong promise. This is not a romantic musical. What is this musical about? And Sondheim goes, comedy. And Robin says, that's right. Now you write a song promising comedy tonight. And Sondheim smiled, went home and wrote a song called Comedy Tonight, which Robbins staged as the funniest number maybe in musical theater history. And as soon as they put the number in, it was a hit. Do you know who told me the story? Madeline Gilford. And I said, well, what you went through is exactly what my fictional character went through. Can I use that line? Go ahead, blacklist yourself. She says, go, darling, take. Interestingly enough, her son, Joe Gilford, who's a friend of mine, wrote a terrific play called Finks. Although he changes the names, it's the story of his parents and Jerome Robbins. And it's a terrific play, Finks. So, are
you going to write an autobiography or a memoir?
No.
These stories are phenomenal.
No, I mean they come out. I tell these stories in classes, and they come out in articles that I write, and they're incidental to other things. Who would buy my autobiography? No, I mean I'm flattered that you've invited me on the show, but I'm one of those sort of behind the scenes guys that people behind the scenes know a little bit, but nobody out in the general public knows me.
Oh, wait till tomorrow after being on the Jim Master Show live. Your phone's going to be smoking, and you're a lovety too. You were already designated 2 hours ago a lovety.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, that tops it all, doesn't it? Peabody's, Emmys, Grammys, Tonys, Oscars.
Well, I haven't won any of those, but okay.
Speaking of
here's the thing.
Yeah.
Is that the great pleasure is to go where places are doing interesting, where people are doing interesting work.
Linda would read your autobiography.
Well,
She had a question. She wants to know if you ever wrote music for any of your plays and productions.
well, yes. The first musical I did was that musical Winging It, and I wrote book music and lyrics for that, and for a play called American Enterprise, which was a big historical drama. That was a play with songs, and I wrote 4 or 5 songs for that play, and I was very lucky because I had Pat Birch, who choreographed Grease, directing that. She also directed the musical that Melissa and I wrote. Oh, do you want to hear a funny Pat Birch, Melissa Manchester story?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Since it's not going to be in the book.
Okay. Pat Birch was directing the second production of What About Love with Austin Pendleton and Judy Kay and David Green. And the first day of rehearsal, I fell in love with her. I just thought she was great. She was doing a wonderful job. She was funny as hell. She was smart as hell. I knew that she'd also been the resident choreographer for Saturday Night Live for the first several years, as well as choreographing Grease. And I said, listen, I'm writing a musical with Melissa Manchester. I have a hunch this would be something you might be interested in to direct. Would you be interested in taking a look at it? And she said, I'd love to look at it. I should warn you, Melissa may not want to work with me. And I said, why not? And she says, well, I once fired her. And I said, oh? And she said, yeah, I fired her. She was an understudy in the Me Nobody Knows. And I was a choreographer and I had to fire her. So I said, well, let me check this out. So I call up Melissa and I say, hey, Melissa, we've got a chance to get like a really, gifted director to direct our musical. She's read it. She really likes it a lot. And Melissa said, she? And I said, Pat Birch. Melissa says, bitch fired me once. And I said, yeah. And then Melissa said, well, she was right to fire me. I didn't know what the hell I was doing in that show. So I said, so you're willing to meet her? She says, yeah, I'll meet her. And so we're going to meet at O'Neill's, near Lincoln Center. And Pat and I are sitting at a table, and Melissa comes in the doorway. It's lunch, and it's like light behind, and she's this silhouette coming and approaching. And Melissa comes with about 10 feet of us. And then Melissa just stands there, and she looks at Pat like this. Pat gets up and puts her arms like this and goes like this back at her. And they look at each other for 10 seconds and howl and throw themselves into each other's arms, and became the best friends. And Melissa would crash at Pat's all the time when she came into town. And Pat became our director. And that's how we got to work. But you ordinarily don't think kindly of the person who fired you.
Usually not.
But they were perfectly matched. And at that point, this is back when Melissa was still married. And she says, I've got 3 husbands. I said, right. She says, I've got my husband, I've got you, and I've got Pat. Because she turns into a little old Jewish man whenever I'm around.
That's hilarious. I wanted to talk briefly about the teaching that you're doing. We have the website there as well, the negotiatingstage.com. Tell us about that.
Okay, well, I gave a talk several months ago. I think I mentioned this earlier.
Yeah.
For the Dramatists Guild, and at the end of the talk, I got a lot of messages saying, do you teach? Do you teach online? I say I teach, but I've never taught online. And a bunch of people said, oh, try it. I said, what can it hurt? So a friend named who's head of the Philadelphia chapter of the Dramatists Guild said, I'll help you organize it, Marge Bricknell. And I said, okay. And she helped organize it because at that point I didn't know from Zoom. And much to my surprise, it worked. It was a group of people bringing in advanced work. And then I said, I'd kind of like to do a class of beginning technique. And she said, all right, I'll advertise and see. And we filled up the class in one day. I said, oh, I guess, oh, okay. And then at the end of that class, they said, we don't want to break up. We want to keep studying technique. And I said, okay, well, then we'll have a second technique class. It's advanced technique. And so I keep doing technique 1. And then people graduate from technique 1 to technique 2. and then some of the people join me on Sunday. The next time I'll be accepting new students will be in about 3 months for Technique 1, because we're just starting the latest group. I've filled all my classes.
Are there any prerequisites? Anything they have to have done to participate?
I've been very lucky so far, mostly because the people who've mostly heard about me have heard about me through the Dramatist Guild because they're members of the Guild. So they've had to do something in order to become members of the Dramatist Guild. Now, I'm not going to say that's that one is obliged to be a member of the Dramatist Guild generally, because somewhere along the line I probably run out of members of the Dramatist Guild who want to work with me. I would say that if somebody isn't a member of the Guild, I would probably like to see some sample work to see if I can be useful. You know, you can't teach everybody. There are some people that you can look at and you can say, this is talented work and I don't know what I would teach you. You know, you have to be modest enough to know who you're useful to. And there have been people that I thought, you know, I don't know what you're going to get from me. And I've been able to recommend other people who I thought were a better match.
Have there been those over the time that you've taught, whether through this or, you know, online or even earlier than that, who have gone on to these phenomenal, extraordinary experiences?
Yeah, well, I mean, remember the group that I formed back in the early days. Donald, when he came in, had never written a play longer than 14 pages. And he says that he learned to write in that group. We got stuck with the jokey name, the writer's block. In fact, the negotiating stage is what I originally wanted to call that group. And Ann Mira said, the negotiating stage, that's the most pretentious fucking thing I've ever heard. And that was the end of that title for the group. So I've revived it because she's not here to mock me. But somebody said, why don't we call ourselves the writer's block? Get it? The writer's block. And I went, okay, sticky, but okay. And but Donald came in and he had not written anything longer than 14 pages. But those 14 pages were terrific. And I said, this is the seed of a full-length play. And indeed, he wrote that play and it came to Broadway. It wasn't a hit, but it was a great play. And then Jane Anderson, I told you about, came in. Keith Gordon joined us when he was 16. Matt Whitten, I can't remember what he had done before then, but he went from that to writing, I think, Monk.
Tony Shalhoub, yeah.
Yeah, Michael Wright was a member of that group, and Michael went on to become an important playwriting teacher and wrote some very good books on technique. Warren Light tells me that he studied with me, and he's running Law and Order SUV. And one of the people he hired for Law and Order SUV is Cheryl Davis, who is a lawyer. In fact, is a lawyer for the Authors Guild. In fact, was my lawyer. And now she's writing for Law and Order SUV and writing plays and stuff. So I've had a fair amount of success with people that I've worked with and that I've encouraged. But I also, this business can be awfully mean. And I go to, in a normal year, I'll go to see 130 plays a year. And I will sometimes see a play that I think is really very good and that has gotten crappy reviews. And I make it my business when I see a play that I think is talented and has gotten misunderstood. I make it my business to try to get in touch with the writer and say, let me buy you coffee, you know, and let me tell you how good you are, and not to be discouraged. You know, I hesitate bringing my own lousy reviews, but I've had some. You know, sometimes people say, thanks for the thought. I don't need consolation from you. I'm married. You know, a few of the times I've been able to get together with people and say, not just you're good, but here's why you're good, and point out what I admired technically in something they've done. And I'm glad to say that in a couple cases, it's kept people writing. This is an awfully discouraging business, and I think that it's part of the job of people who are lucky to have careers to be helpful to other people when you can do it.
What would you say to somebody who's watching live right now or later in our archives who's considering going into these lines of work?
I would say study improvisation, because you'll learn what actors need, and you'll learn more on your feet from improvisation than most playwriting classes, including mine. I would say go see a lot of stuff, but be very, 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 very analytical. Don't just sit there and enjoy something. As you're watching it, write the list of objects that come up and how they're used in the play. Take a look at where violations of ritual and expectation have come up. Why did the play start there? Is this a character structured play, or is this an event structured play? Not everybody can go from analysis to synthesis, but a lot of people can. That's who I'm useful to, is people who can go from analysis to synthesis. On the other hand, there are some people who are great writers who analysis does nothing for them. If you've ever read Tennessee Williams' memoirs, in the hopes that you're going to learn from Tennessee Williams how to write Streetcar Named Desire, you'll get nothing out of it. You will get page after page of torrid love affairs and famous people he met and enthusiasms. But there's very little in there about how to write a play. And he does this. I think he wrote that book as well as he could without talking about technique, because I don't think he had a conscious technique. I think he had this kind of inner gyroscope that when it was working, he wrote really, really well. And when he started, falling under the influence of the drugs he was taking, the gyroscope just failed him. And that's why towards the end of his career, he had more problems. But I don't think I can teach people who are instinctive. I think I can teach people who are analytical. People who are instinctive, I just sit aside and admire what they do, because they frequently come up with wonderful stuff. And I said, how did you come up with that? And they just say, I don't know, just did.
It just, yeah. Right.
And it's God whispering in their ear, Salieri being pissed off at Mozart. But most of us don't have God's whispering in our ear. Most of us have to learn professional technique in order to be. If you get a job in television, they don't care what mood you're in.
No.
One year when I was writing a soap opera, I was in the middle of a divorce that broke my damn heart. For a year, I could barely breathe. But I had to earn a living, and I was writing for the soaps. How's that for escapism?
Did you work it into a script?
No. I will tell you one secret, and it's not a secret. Avoid autobiographic plays. And I'll tell you
that would be because why? Yeah.
I'll tell you why. Because we think of ourselves, excuse me for a second, we think of ourselves as acted upon rather than acting. And so the characters that are based on us are almost always passive. And if you put a passive character as the lead character on stage, the character will not drive the play. Even in good plays, the autobiographic character is the least interesting character. In Long Day's Journey into Night, of the four major characters, the least interesting character is the character that O'Neill based on himself. And when I am looking at a play that is by somebody talented but doesn't quite work, more often than not, it's because it's an autobiographic. It's an autobiographic play, and the leading character is passive. I will tell you, though, one of the cleverest tricks I've heard of, and this is by my friend Catherine Butterfield, who I talked to you about a little earlier. She was writing a play that was autobiographic. That was about her relationship with an ex-boyfriend and that ex-boyfriend's wife, who was very ill, and her friendship with the wife. And she thought, this is an interesting situation. And I said, but this happened to you, and yet you wrote a good play. How did you write a good play? How did the character based on you not turn out to be a lousy character? She says, I'll tell you how I did it. She says, at the time I was touring in Wendy Wasserstein's play, The Heidi Chronicles. and I knew Wendy pretty well. And I thought Wendy was one of the funniest, smartest people I knew. And I thought, what would Wendy say if she was in this place? So she wasn't writing herself. She was writing what Wendy would do if she were in Catherine's place. And so she recast herself as Wendy Wasserstein. And because Wendy Wasserstein was never passive, the character was not a passive character. I thought that's what I said to her. That's one of the smartest substitutions I've ever heard. Mm. She said, I tried writing it autobiographically and it wasn't working. It wasn't until I got Wendy to play me in my imagination that the play worked. And I thought, that's craft. You can use that. You know?
Have you ever wanted to be an actor yourself and a performer yourself, as much as you are the behind the scenes, the creator, the playwright, the dreamer? Have you ever wanted to be on stage doing it?
I did it that one time when I did the solo show, and I had great fun doing it. And then, and every now and then somebody asked me to do it. I did it, last year at the Philadelphia Fringe and had fun doing it. And I did it in, I don't know. I've done it in about a dozen or so cities, and happy to do it. But to do a regular run of it, I think would drive me bloody crazy.
Yeah.
And
how about voiceover work? You have a wonderful voice.
There are other people who do this stuff better.
So you tip your hat to them. Yeah.
I'm so in admiration. I am very happy to do cold readings.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story about a cold reading. I got a call from a friend of mine who had written a play at the last minute. He said, "Do you do cold readings?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Well, I'm supposed to have a reading this afternoon at William Morris. Will you come up and do a cold reading for me?" And he couldn't even get me the damn script because this was in the days before the internet. I said, "Sure, I'll come up." So I go up there and I'm suddenly blanking on his name. Come on now, he's in disrepute now. The guy who won Kevin Spacey. That's who it is. It's a play about two guys who sit around and watch football every Sunday and how their wives are football widows. And the two guys sitting around watching football all Sunday were me and Kevin Spacey. And I've seen him off Broadway, so I knew how good he was. And I had fun reading with him. Never met him again, and said virtually nothing except "I enjoy your work," and had fun. So some years later, the play was done in Williamstown. And I was talking to the writer and I said, how did the Williamstown production go? He said, "It went really well." He says, "You gave a good reading. And I thought of asking you if you would like to come up and play that part at Williamstown." And then my friend said, "No, he'll be insulted. He's a writer. He'll be insulted to come be a mere actor." I said, "The Writers Guild strike was on. I was making no money. I would have jumped at the chance to do it." I said, "So who did you get to play my part?" He says, "George Wendt."
From Cheers.
Yeah, who's an old friend of mine from Second City. And I said, "Sure, that's the way it goes. They can't get me. They settle for George."
They settle for George. What are some things that you still have on that bucket list? Things you still want to do, things that are still out there that maybe are sort of begun, or they're just sitting on the desk, or just dreams that you have going forward?
Well, there are always other stories I want to tell. So I've got, 4 or 5 other pieces that I'm in the middle of or researching or kicking around. I've also gotten sort of hung up on the year 1945 because that's a year when right after the war, 45, 46, America just changed radically. All these guys were back. All these women had worked in factories and did not want to go back to being housewives. Blacks came back from fighting overseas and being treated decently by the French and thinking, maybe I don't have to put up with crap in the United States anymore. Beginning of the Cold War, the beginning of and what was going on in New York was fabulous. The beginning of bebop and abstract expressionism. I mean, New York in the late 40s and early 50s was a playground. Don't let anybody tell you that the 50s were dead and dull and brainless. New York in the 50s were amazing. So I'm kind of fascinated by this period, which was before I came here, and I'm reading books and newspaper articles and old issues of the New Yorker and stuff like that to see if I can find a story that nobody knows about something that happened, and see whether I might find a project out of that. I mean, are there things that I would like to do? Sure. I don't think I'm going to get to Broadway. I'd love to, but I don't think I'm going to get there.
What does it take to get there? I hear that from so many people who've been doing things for decades. What does it really take to get there?
I don't know.
I mean, we know Carnegie Hall is practice, 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 but what is it about Broadway?
Well, it would help if I had if George Clooney were a friend of mine and said I have to do this play on Broadway, then it would get done. If I could get the value of names to Danny DeVito, and he, which has a great part in it for him, and he said, "Gee, I had such a good time doing The Price. I'd love to do this for the Roundabout." I bet you the Roundabout would put it on, but I don't run in those circles. I don't know the big movie stars, and also, frankly, the famous people I do know. So Mike Nichols once said to a friend of mine that one of the reasons why he liked me was I never asked him for anything.
Yeah,
I didn't ask him for favors.
No,
this man is being asked for favors all the time. He did me, and in the years that we were friendly, he did me precisely one favor, which is that I told him that an anthology of my plays was coming out, and he said, "Would a blurb from me be good?" I said, "Oh, I think so." So that's the favor. He was very nice, and he gave me a blurb, and I didn't ask him for it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's.
He once said, "Hey, I have a great idea for a movie for us to do together," and we had a couple of meetings, and it was going to be about the early days of Saturday Night Live. He said, "You're the guy to write this, and I want to make a movie about it." And just as we were beginning to start thinking about this, 30 Rock came out, and Aaron Sorkin's show about a backstage at a fictionalized version of SNL came out, and he said, "Well, that was that idea, and that was the end of that." So
move quickly, I guess, huh?
No, they came out literally within weeks of him proposing it to me.
Wow,
it happened that fast.
Wow.
And but I was flattered that he asked.
Yeah.
And he didn't live long enough to ask me again.
Oh, I know.
But I'd love to go back into television. I got to tell you, I find that what's going on in television now to be more interesting than most features. Have you watched
how about Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu and all these extra Roku, all these other side?
Do you have Apple Plus?
Yeah.
Have you seen any of the episodes of Little America?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My God, are those brilliant.
Yeah.
One about the mother on the ship is just perfect.
Yeah.
It's 30 minutes and it's as satisfying as a feature film. I'd say out of those 8 episodes, 5 of them are as good as features. And I just thought, look at what they're doing. Look at the storytelling. And that's what's happening on the TV today. Also, if you watch a lot of foreign television, which I do, I love Danish and Swedish and Norwegian television. What they're doing, it just makes you, it's like, do you know the story about, this is one of my favorite stories about the way Gershwin worked with his colleagues.
Tell us.
He loved his colleagues. He loved fellow songwriters. And when somebody did something technically, he would not only praise them to the skies. There's one story where he saw sort of a broke songwriter colleague friend of his who'd written a song he liked, and he said, "I'm going to a party. Come with me. You have to share this with the people at the party." But he saw it as a friendly competition. This guy did this, which gives me the idea to do that. We're building off each other's accomplishments and insights and technical things. There was something in Lanford's play Lemon Sky that knocked me out technically. And I said to him, I think I have to dedicate my next play to you, because either I dedicate it to you or you sue me for plagiarism. He said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, you've come up with a device called I'm calling the hypothetical scene that I've never seen anybody else do before, and I want to do a hypothetical scene in my play." And so he read it. He said, "You're right. Thank you." He says, "But then I did the same thing to Arthur Coppett." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, Arthur Coppett wrote this play, Oh, Dad, Poor Dad, And he had this long monologue, which Austin Pendleton did, which was like 20 minutes long. And Lanford said, I thought I would write a long monologue in Balm and Gilead, 25 minutes, to see if I could beat Arthur. And I said, did you ever tell Arthur? And he says, no, don't you think he'd be upset? And I said, I don't think he'd be upset. And I told Arthur, and Arthur says, that's marvelous. That's wonderful.
So he copied Coppet.
Yeah. But he wrote a 25-minute monologue, which was sensational and made Laurie Metcalf a star, because he wanted to see if he could write a longer monologue and get away with it than what Arthur had written for Austin.
Unbelievable.
So, writers, there's something collegial, where you challenge each other with your work. You read something or you hear something, you say, God, look at what that opens a door.
Yes.
That's how to do this idea.
That's right. Aha, light bulb moments, right? Exactly.
Yeah, and from your friends,
right,
and colleagues. And then, if you're lucky enough, you get to thank them and get to work with them, or you get to be helpful to them, or they get to be helpful to you. This is a surprisingly generous business. It's just none of my friends have become superstars yet, and will open my plays on Broadway.
There's still time. There's still time. When you look at the body of work, and when you look at everything that you've done thus far and continue to do, Jeffrey, what are some of those things, those blessings, those joys, those inspirations that still call upon you to be ever the creator?
Well, partially it's writing for friends sometimes. Counselor was written because I thought Jeff McCarthy would make a good counselor. I've written a couple of plays with Tandy Cronin in mind, because I think she's a great actress who isn't well enough known, but I think she's brilliant. And so I wrote a couple plays to try to show that off. I frequently see actresses. There's an actress I'd love to write for named Nadia Bowers, who did a play called Life Sucks. That was a couple summers ago, and I was just dazzled by her work. And
could have been revived in 2021.
Yeah. But she, Marin, is it Hinkle? I'm blanking on her name, but who did the revival of Summer and Smoke for CSC.
Mm-hmm.
She was spectacular. I never quite got around to writing a play for Lynn Cohen, who alas died this year, an older lady who I thought was one of the great actresses of our time. And I kept trying to come up with something for her because I adored her as a person, and I wanted to write something for her. And I just never nailed it. I never got the idea. But I like writing specifically for people. And there are people who are well-known I'd love to write for, and there are people unknown or lesser known that I'd love to write for. It's funny, Lanford told me that Glenn Close once said, write something for me. And he said, and I was an idiot. I never did. He said, how could I turn down the opportunity to write for Glenn Close? He says, I just never came up with the idea for her. And so Jane Anderson wrote two things for Glenn Close, and they did pretty well. But writing for specific people or for specific opportunities, would I like to write for specific companies? Yeah, there are people I'd love to work with. The prospect of collaborating with people, of working with people, is what keeps me going.
Would you have liked to have worked with George Burns?
I don't think I could be as funny as he was. Although, did you ever?
You have a George Burns story, don't you?
No, I only got to see him once. But did you ever see the film with him as the bank robber?
Yes. Yeah.
He is so tough and he is so mean in that film. And I looked at that and I thought, this guy's got range nobody knew. There is not. When I heard that it was about a tough bank robber leading a gang of, and I saw Lee Strasberg was in it, I thought, oh, Lee Strasberg's going to be the tough gangster and George Burns is going to be the sidekick. Burns was the gangster.
Yeah. And
he was terrifying. And I thought, Jesus God, wow, this guy is a great actor. I don't
play God too.
Yeah. Well, once you can play God, I guess you can play anything. But no, I thought, that was serious dramatic work. That was really, what was it? Going in Style? Was that the name of the picture?
Mm-hmm.
He and Art Carney and somebody's mentioning, yes, Austin was in
June. Yeah, June said.
Yeah, Austin was. It was one of the best things I've seen him do.
Mm.
It was a terrific play. I'm a fan of other people.
Yeah, I can. That's a running theme that I've heard through all of this, and some of the viewers, Juanita in South Africa, where it's very late, it's wee into the morning there, and she's still with us. Thank you, Jeffrey, for your time and sharing your amazing stories with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Wozniak says thank you for sharing your amazing life with us. So many people have been commenting about that. You have had an amazing career. Thank you for sharing your life story, Jeffrey. You have such great stories. Thank you for sharing them. Jeffrey, you have led a very interesting life, and on and on.
A very lucky life.
Blessed.
A very lucky life. And let me just say one parting thought. Almost everything good that's happened to me is because I was interested in somebody else's work.
Which is a beautiful thing, it's very inspiring. You, it was really an honor and a pleasure to have you here as my guest, and you're welcome back anytime. And I know you've watched the show before and sort of got a feel for it. And I really appreciate the fact that you wanted to spend time with us. We've chatted almost 3 hours, but it doesn't feel like 3 hours, does it? It just rolls. It's comfortable and warm, and it doesn't.
It's been very nice, and thank you. I've had a it's the funny thing. Sometimes it's somebody else asking you something that objectifies things that you say, oh, okay, that was true. I didn't notice that.
Right.
So there've been a few moments like that for me where I went, oh, I didn't quite realize that. Okay. So it's very interesting to be on the other side of the microphone, because I'm usually the one who does the interviewing.
Right, exactly. Bernadette says, Jeffrey, thank you for taking the time to share your memories and insights with us. June says, so true, helping others. Absolutely. Well, I hope the show met whatever expectations you had, and that you enjoyed the time with me and all the lovely viewers, as I certainly have with you, Jeffrey.
Well, feel free to give me a yell if somebody falls out at the last minute. Let me know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What would be something you would say to describe your experience on the Jim Masters Show live?
Everything here was but the coffee.
You must have missed the green room, because we usually have lobster, champagne, and fine chocolates and cheeses from Europe.
Yeah.
Was that gone when you showed up?
Pretty much so, yes.
The crew, they are vultures.
I saw a couple of candy wrappers.
Yeah, the crew, they're vultures, the crew.
It was good candy, but they were just the wrappers.
It was just the wrappers. Jeffrey, thank you for sharing your fascinating backstories and your valuable insights. As a playwright, you had such an interesting life and career, and you still do. And stay safe and well as well. And thank you for hanging with us, Jeffrey. Stay safe. Jennifer, Jeffrey, Jen is Zen, enjoying tonight with you and Jim and everyone. Jeffrey, this really was a pleasure, and you're welcome back anytime. And again, I hope truly that you enjoyed the time with us here on the show.
I had a lovely time, and thank you for inviting me.
Jane's here and says, I enjoyed the journey through your career, Jeffrey, including your Melissa Manchester stories. You are a man of many stories, and I really appreciate you sharing them with us as well. You be well, you stay safe, stay happy, keep creating for all of us, and let's stay in touch. And hopefully, once we can get together, I would love to, maybe June could join us as well, and we get together, break bread, and
it'd be a lot of fun. I'd enjoy that a lot.
That would be awesome. June also says, so much fun tonight. I agree. Take care, my friend. You be well, and we'll chat again soon. And thanks for all the time on our show. Now go stretch those legs. I tell that to everybody, go stretch those legs. All right. You take care.
Bye.
All right. Tim, is it Tim that says, see you Sunday?
Yeah, he's one of my students.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Tim. Give us subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would love that, Tim. And Karen says, thank you, Jeffrey, as well. Lots of levity coming your way from our show, my friend. Have a good night. You take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. The one and only Jeffrey Sweet, legendary award-winning playwright, songwriter, journalist, writer, and so much more. And extraordinary to spend this amount of time with somebody who really loves life and loves creating and inspiring others through his works, and also through teaching others as well, as he's doing. Kathy Short from Cleveland says, very interesting chat tonight. I agree. A lot of you were posting that you were learning things along the way about the industry, about playwriting, about television, about all of it. And that's what's great. We always have a good time, lots of levity, lots of fun, entertainment and more. But we always end up on every episode of the Jim Master Show Live learning something, don't we? Things that we can take with us through our own lives and maybe adapt them to our own experiences. You might not be a playwright, a songwriter, a journalist, or what have you, or a host or whatever it may be. But there's certain things about these conversations and about the time we spend together that we all learn from. I do as well, as much as our lovely international viewing audience around the world. That's why we call it the show that it is, the Jim Master Show Live Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show Series. Now, I know we always like to see chairs, right? So you want to see a chair? There you go. Every episode, every show, this is becoming a running theme where we see the empty chair. Sometimes it's when a guest during the conversation has to run off for a second because their battery dies out and they have to recharge, or they get some water or whatever it is, or it's at the end. So there is the chair for tonight. This is amazing. We always see a lot of, there it is. There's your chair. I'm going to do one whole episode where all we have is empty chairs. And we're going to see, we're going to do a contest, a poll. Well, which chair did you like better? Her chair or his chair or this chair? A couple people have swiveled in the chairs. I mean, they've actually made chairs a whole topic. And you know me, I humanize the chair. So I'm thinking, I don't know. That chair looks like an Arthur, doesn't it? Or Walter? What would you say? What would you name that chair? Well, Jeffrey. I guess it would be Jeffrey, right? Looks very regal. It's a very regal chair. So just having some fun as we always do. It's just amazing how we always see the chair. I think it's been months and months where we've seen the empty chairs, and it's just if you're joining us for the first time, it's just a running situation here where we see the chair all the time, and it's fabulous. I think it's fantastic. We'll call it Jeff Jr. We can call that chair Jeff Jr. And we have to guess whose chair it is. That's what I should do. I should do a whole thing with the chairs. It's all about the chair. That's right, Maureen. LOL, chair time. And we have to guess whose chair it is. That's right. Remember Cherry from Pee Wee Herman. That's right, exactly. I know, and the chair's still there. And the books as well. Remember Cherry, yes, from Pee Wee Herman, and Chair Name, yes, Chair Name. Onyx, I like that, Jennifer Barry in Allentown, Pennsylvania. That is fantastic. And Juanita says, wow, such a big and interesting life. Great show, Jim. Thank you, Juanita. I know it's late for you there in South Africa, but you are a real lovely, a real trooper, and we appreciate that. And Karen says, such an interesting life he has led. I agree. Sherry says, wonderful to meet you, Jeffrey. Please come back soon since you're a lovety now. Absolutely. We will have him back. Absolutely. Linda in St. Augustine, Florida says, thank you, Jeffrey. These are all of our lovely viewers. Kathy Short in Cleveland, Ohio, USA. Very interesting chat tonight. Thank you. Karen Campbell Green in Nova Scotia, Canada says, thank you, Jeffrey. Absolutely. And we appreciate that. And Patricia Snyder, thanks for watching, Patricia, on our YouTube channel. Hopefully you can subscribe to the channel. We would love it. Thanks, Jeffrey, and thank you for watching as well. Cool stuff. So this was an amazing conversation tonight. We went about 3 hours, and I should enter these shows into the Guinness Book of Records, right? Because even talk shows of the past, they never really went 3 hours. What, a half hour, hour and a half? maybe 2 hours. I think the maximum that the Tonight Show went in the early years with Steve Allen, Jack Parr, and Carson was what, 2 hours, and then an hour and a half. But we just let it roll. It's all about, bringing back the lost art of conversation with inspiration, positivity, love, light, levity, and as we've created here with our wonderful community from around the world of guests and viewers, levity. Bernadette says, thanks, Jim. Good night to you and all the lovities. Until tomorrow, stay safe and stay well. Absolutely. We should send pictures of all of us in our favorite chairs or couches. That would be nice. If you haven't, just the guests you've already had on back again, you could go for another full year. I know, just with their chairs. The other night, we even got to see a couch. Yes, you did. That's right. One of our guests had to charge her battery during the conversation, so she didn't have just the chair. She had a full leather sofa with a fireplace, and when she had to get up and go, we saw the full couch and we saw the fireplace. On this episode, on this series, we do see a lot of the chairs. Join us tomorrow. We have an amazing guest tomorrow. We're here 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and we look forward to welcoming our guests tomorrow. Check out our Facebook page at Jim Masters TV and also our YouTube channel at Jim Masters TV. You'll have an opportunity to see all of the guests that are coming up. You want to see the chair again, right? There it is. Yes, Onyx. We can name the chair Onyx. Some amazing guests that are coming up all throughout the week and the weekend. I do want to tell you, coming up this week, incredible pianist, violinist, and composer David Shenton is going to be here. And on Saturday, we have incredible French-Greek singer George Paris, live and direct from Athens, Greece, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. in Greece. That's going to be on our YouTube channel. Again, he had a public television special. He's a dear friend. French-Greek singer George Paris will be live from Athens, Greece this Saturday. Then on Saturday night, Grammy-winning composer, this is an incredible guest, John Prue is going to be with us, and he's a brilliant composer, pianist, extraordinary Grammy winner. He's all excited. He's going to be here on Saturday night. So we have singer-songwriter George Paris on Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern, a special time. Then Saturday night, Grammy-winning composer, arranger, and pianist John Prue is going to be here as well, which is going to be amazing. On Sunday, live from Ireland, Ireland's leading country music singer Nathan Carter. He was also on a public television special, and that's where he and I met about a year or so ago, and he's going to be joining us at special time earlier, live from Ireland, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, 8 p.m. GMT. He might actually be in England. He is Ireland's leading country music singer, but he lives in England and was born originally in England. YouTube, Jim Masters TV is going to be the channel for you. We thank once again our wonderful guest. He's like, stop, wait, I have some more stories to tell you. We will have Jeffrey back. And he was absolutely amazing, and he was a delight. And we thank him for joining us here on the Jim Masters Show Live. Want to let you know as well, Anson Williams, who starred in Happy Days, is going to be with us. There he is when he was Potsy on Happy Days, and there he is today. He's got a lot of stories to tell. Rebecca Harkin, who is a brilliant Irish singer-songwriter. She's in Australia right now. She's going to be here. She is the sister of Keith Harkin, who, of course, was originally with the popular Irish group Celtic Thunder. She's going to be here coming up in just a couple of weeks as well. Just some of the great guests. As we always say on the Jim Masters Show Live, don't forget to smile and share the smile with somebody. Don't forget also to share the levity. Very important, not just now during these crazy times, but all the time. Share the levity and also find your Zen place. Mine, of course, the ultimate is with loving family and friends, but then I also love the ocean. Growing up here in the northeastern United States, we're always exposed to the ocean. We live here close, not far from the ocean, and the ocean, I'm always in it, swimming, surfing, kiteboarding, boogie boarding, floating in it, sailing, whatever, walking along it. The ocean is a beautiful Zen place for me. You find your Zen place as well. Also, my work in television and radio and stage and multimedia all these years is another Zen place for me, and always has been. So working with incredible people and always having an opportunity to be creative on air and behind the scenes for me has always been a very Zen place. And I know when Jeffrey's doing what he does, it's a Zen place for him as well. So find your Zen place. And one other thing we always say here on our show as we get ready to close, don't forget, not just during these crazy times, but all the time, take time for yourself. Love one another, but also love yourself. Breathe from the diaphragm. It makes a huge difference. And relax as often as you can. We live in a very fast-paced world, and sometimes we're always worried about clearing out that inbox and answering all the emails and moving forward, that we don't take time to stop and cherish what we just worked on, what we just experienced, what we just did. And I'm somebody who's very big on that. I always try, even though I work in an industry, television, radio, media, all of this, that's so fast-paced. It's about next now. And Jeffrey knows that as well with the work he does. You have to take time to appreciate, to breathe, relax, and soak in the experiences, because if you don't, they fly by in a New York minute, and life is very short. So take time to relax, to breathe, and savor the moments. It's all ongoing learning. It's life learning. We always learn, and we've certainly learned a lot from the year that we've gone through and together as well. You're all a blessing. We thank you very, very much for joining us. As Karen says, share the lovity. Absolutely. Have a good night in Nova Scotia, Sharon. And Juanita says, good night, Jim and everyone. You guys are real troopers sticking with us here. Karen says, Nathan Carter. Yes, he's here on Sunday. And Sherry says, good night, all, and please stay safe. See you in Lovity Hall again soon. Yeah, we've got an amazing guest tomorrow who's going to be live from Washington, D.C. It's going to be a very special show. You're going to love it. Check out our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. I'm just teasing you a little bit. I want you to go to the YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV, or the Facebook page, Jim Masters TV, and see who our amazing guest is. You're going to love it. We're going to all learn something tomorrow. Have a good night, Sherry. Yes, show us your chair. We will do that. I love that. That's a good idea. I'll have to get a big fancy king's chair for Masters, right? Good night, Jim, and all the lovelies. See you next time. Thank you, Mona. Karen says you are a blessing too, Jim. Thank you very much, Karen. I appreciate that very, very much. Jennifer Barry in Allentown, Pennsylvania says, I'm now in my warm PJs under warm, soft blanket on the couch. Jen is Zen. Fantastic. I think I'm going to do that in a couple of seconds myself. Karen says, relax and spread the lovity, friends. Christine Clifton, watching on YouTube, says this was a very interesting and informative evening with Jeffrey. Thanks to Jim. Good night, Jim and lovity. Stay safe out there. You as well, Christine. Thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate that. Mona says, great show tonight. Thank you very much, Mona, in Louisiana. And thanks again for those spices and that chicory coffee that you sent. Wow, we're using it here. And that was a beautiful gift to send from New Orleans and Louisiana. We really appreciate that. Time for self-care is very important. You got it, Bernadette. And Kathy Short in Cleveland. Good night, Jim and Lovities. See you all tomorrow. We try to show as many as we can, but sometimes they go by so quickly, we don't get a chance to see them all. And Linda Odell in St. Augustine, Florida says, good night, Mr. Lovity, and good night, Lovities. You as well, my friend, and all of you watching. And we love having you here. This is your host, Jim Masters, thanking you for your time this time. Till next time, we hope you enjoyed this episode. You can see all over 230 episodes of the Jim Masters Show Live Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show series on our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. If you missed anything, if you want to see this episode with our very special guest, Jeffrey Sweet, and you want to see it again or you want to share it, you can see it all right there on our YouTube channel. 24/7 you can watch. You can binge watch. I know a lot of you say you binge watch. I understand that you can't see every episode live. So that's why we have them all archived. You can watch also on demand at your leisure. We do lead busy lives these days. A lot of people have been doing binge watching, which we love as well. So as we get ready to wrap up and we say au revoir, cheers, good night, sayonara, stay safe, good night, Kathleen Walker in New York City. Yes, June, my dear friend, we will talk soon. Hopefully we'll get together and go to a good New York diner and have some split pea soup and at midnight after we see a show like you and I like to do, hopefully soon, fingers crossed. And night to you as well, June, and time for a cuppa before bed. Good night. All right, gang. Love you all. Thanks for your time and your attention and joining us here on the Jim Master Show Live. Spread the word. Tell everybody about our series. It continues to grow. Follow me on YouTube at Jim Masters TV, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all these places, Twitch, Periscope, all the Jim Masters TV. As opposed to just walking into a television studio or a radio station and saying, hi, turn on the lights, let's go. Twitch, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, blah, 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 blah. I'm there. You can find me all at Jim Masters TV. See, I tried to make it easy for you guys. It's all Jim Masters TV. Thank you very much, Karen. There's no room on the couch for your Ken. That is funny. Have a good night, gang. We love you all, and thanks for watching the show tonight. We will see you tomorrow right here on the Jim Masters Show Live. I hope you're here. If you're not, we'll see you on the next one. You stay safe and be well. We love you all around the world. All the lovities on the Jim Masters Show Live. Have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.